Hello everyone, I am Mano Scaling, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and also tell me where you are from and what time you are watching. Now get comfortable and relax. Story 1. I'm Stella, 34. I saw a hand waving from under the lake at Shasta Trinity National Forest. We'd been planning this trip for months. Me, my husband Derek, and our 2 daughters, Maya and Sophie. The RV we'd rented was supposed to be our escape pod from the suffocating routine of suburban life. Derek had been working 80-hour weeks at the firm, and I'd been drowning in PTA meetings and soccer practices. The girls needed their parents back. We all needed to remember what it felt like to be a family. Shasta Trinity seemed perfect. Remote enough to feel like an adventure. Accessible enough that we wouldn't need special equipment or skills. The photos online showed crystalline lakes surrounded by towering pines, meadows that looked like they'd been painted by someone who understood what peace actually meant. We'd booked a spot near Hertz Bay, on the northern arm of Shasta Lake. The ranger I'd spoken to on the phone had assured me it was family-friendly, with good fishing and calm waters. What he hadn't mentioned was how the trees grew so thick in some places that the sunlight seemed to give up, trying to reach the ground. We arrived on a Thursday afternoon in late September. The drive had taken longer than expected. Derek had insisted on taking back roads to see the real California, which meant we'd spent 3 hours winding through mountain passes that made my stomach clench every time I looked out the window at the drop-offs. The girls had been troopers about it. Maya reading her book in the back while Sophie played some game on her tablet until the signal died somewhere around Redding. The campsite was more isolated than the photos had suggested. We were the only RV in sight, though the ranger at the entrance station had mentioned a few tent campers scattered around the lake's perimeter. Our spot sat on a small promontory that jutted into the water, surrounded by Douglas firs that must have been 100 feet tall. The lake stretched out before us, dark and still as oil, reflecting the late afternoon sky. "It's beautiful," I said, trying to inject enthusiasm into my voice. Something about the place made me uneasy, though I couldn't articulate what. The silence, maybe, or the way the water didn't seem to move, even when the breeze picked up. Derek was already setting up the RV's leveling jacks, his face set in that focused expression he got when he was determined to prove he could handle something. "This is going to be great," he said. 4 days of nothing but family time. No phones, no emails, no distractions. Sophie pressed her face against the RV window. "The water looks weird." "It's just the light, honey," I told her, though I'd noticed it too. The lake had an odd quality to it, like it was somehow thicker than normal water, more present. We spent the evening getting settled. Derek connected the RV to the generator since there were no hookups this far out. I made spaghetti on the propane stove while the girls explored the immediate area around our site, staying within the boundary I'd set, close enough that I could see them through the windows. Maya found a trail that led down to a small beach area, and she came back excited about swimming the next day. That first night was quiet. Too quiet. I'm used to suburban sounds. Traffic, neighbors, the hum of electricity. Here, there was nothing. Even the wind seemed muted, as if the forest was absorbing every sound before it could travel. We played board games, roasted marshmallows over the fire Derek built, and I took photos of the girls' faces illuminated by the flames. Normal, family stuff. The kind of memories we'd come here to make. But when I looked at those photos later, I noticed something I hadn't seen at the time. In the background, just beyond the firelight, there were shapes in the darkness between the trees. They could have been shadows, branches, tricks of the light, but they looked uncomfortably like figures standing just out of reach, watching. I didn't mention it to Derek. He'd been so stressed lately, and this trip was supposed to help. I deleted the photos and told myself I was being paranoid. Friday morning started well enough. Derek made pancakes while I got the girls ready for a day at the lake. The weather was perfect. Warm, but not hot, with a breeze that carried the scent of pine and something else, something organic and ancient that I associated with deep forests. We packed a cooler with sandwiches and fruit, grabbed the inflatable rafts we'd brought, and headed down to the beach. The water was cold. Not just cool, cold enough that it shocked the breath out of me when I waded in up to my knees. Sophie squealed and ran back out immediately. Maya, always braver, made it to her waist before giving up. Derek laughed at us and dove in, surfacing with a gasp and chattering teeth. "It's not that bad once you get used to it," he lied, his lips already turning blue. I was sitting on a rock at the water's edge, dangling my feet in while keeping an eye on the girls as they built a sandcastle when I saw it. A hand, pale and slender, waving slowly from beneath the surface about 15 feet out. Just the hand and part of a forearm, moving back and forth in a lazy, beckoning gesture. My heart stopped. I stood up so fast I nearly fell over, scanning the water for any sign of someone in distress. "Derek!" I screamed. "Someone's drowning!" He was at my side in seconds, following my pointing finger. But the hand was gone. The water was perfectly still, reflecting the sky like dark glass. "Where?" he demanded. "Right there," I saw. There was a hand waving under the water. Derek stared at the spot, then at me. "Stella, there's nothing there. I saw it. Someone's under the water. We have to—" He grabbed my shoulders. Hey, look at me. There's no one there. The water's clear. If someone was drowning, we'd see them." I looked. He was right. The lake was so clear I could see all the way to the bottom, maybe 12 or 15 feet down. Rocks and submerged logs and nothing else. No body, no person, no hand. "I saw it," I whispered, but doubt was already creeping in. Had I? Or had it been a fish, a piece of debris, a trick of light on water? "The altitude can mess with your head," Derek said gently. "And you didn't sleep well last night. I heard you tossing and turning. You're probably just tired." I nodded slowly, accepting the explanation because the alternative was worse. The girls hadn't noticed anything still playing in the sand. I sat back down, but I couldn't shake the image. The hand had been so pale, almost luminous, and the way it had moved, not frantically, not desperately, but almost playfully, like someone waving hello. We stayed at the beach for another hour, but I couldn't relax. I kept watching the water, waiting for the hand to reappear. It didn't. Eventually, Derek suggested we head back to the RV for lunch. As we walked up the trail, Maya stopped suddenly. "Mom, what's that?" She was pointing at one of the massive fir trees just off the path. Carved into the bark, about 5 feet up, was a symbol I didn't recognize. It looked like a hand with the fingers spread, surrounded by a circle. The carving was old. The exposed wood had darkened with age. "Probably just something a camper carved," Derek said, but his voice had an uncertain edge to it. "It looks like the hand you saw," Sophie said, and her words sent ice down my spine because she was right. The proportions were the same. Long, slender fingers, the palm narrow. We kept walking. But when I glanced back, I could see more of the symbols carved into trees farther into the forest. Dozens of them, stretching back into the shadows. Lunch was subdued. Derek tried to keep things light, suggesting we go fishing that afternoon, but Maya complained of a headache and Sophie didn't want to leave the RV. I found myself agreeing with them. The idea of going back to the lake made my skin crawl. "I'll go check out that fishing spot the ranger mentioned," Derek said finally. "You girls relax here. I'll be back in an hour or two." I didn't want him to go. The thought of being separated, even though he'd only be a quarter-mile away at most, felt wrong. But he'd been looking forward to fishing, and I didn't want to be the wife who ruined everything with irrational anxiety. "Be careful," I said, and kissed him. "Always am." He grabbed his tackle box and rod and headed off down a different trail that apparently led to a better fishing inlet. The girls and I spent the afternoon playing cards and reading. Normal things. Safe things. But I couldn't stop listening to the silence outside. It felt expectant, like the forest was waiting for something. Around 4 o'clock, Sophie said, "Mom, someone's looking in the window." I jerked my head up. She was staring at the small window above the dining table. I could see the reflection of the RV's interior in the glass, but beyond that, only trees and shadows. "There's no one there, sweetie." There was. A lady with long hair. She was smiling. Maya looked up from her book, her face going pale. I saw her too. She was standing really close to the window. My mouth went dry. What did she look like? Wet, Maya said, like she'd been swimming, and her hair was in her face, but she was smiling underneath it. A really big smile. I got up and went to the window, pressing my face against the glass to see out at an angle. Nothing. Just the forest, the shadows between the trees growing longer as the sun moved lower. Maybe it was a reflection, I said, but I didn't believe it. The girls weren't prone to making things up, and they both looked genuinely frightened. I locked the RV door. Then I checked every window, making sure they were all sealed. The action made me feel slightly hysterical, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Derek had been gone for nearly 2 hours. I texted him, but the message didn't go through. No signal this far out. "Why don't you two pick a movie to watch?" I suggested, trying to sound casual. "We can make popcorn." They chose some animated thing I'd seen 100 times. I set up the laptop and got them settled, then stood at the door window, watching for Derek. The sun was setting, painting the lake gold and red, beautiful and terrible at the same time. I saw the hand again. Same spot, same lazy wave. But this time, as I watched, unable to look away, unable to breathe, it rose higher. The wrist emerged, then the forearm, then the elbow. The skin was white as paper, water streaming off it. The hand continued to wave, back and forth, then a second hand joined it, and a third, and a fourth. I counted 12 hands rising from the lake, all waving in perfect synchronization, before I forced myself to turn away from the window. I was shaking so hard I had to sit down. The girls were absorbed in their movie, hadn't noticed. I tried to tell myself I was hallucinating, that the altitude or stress or something was making me see things that weren't there. But I knew what I'd seen, and I knew those hands were real. Derek didn't come back until after dark. By then, I was nearly hysterical with worry. He looked exhausted, and there was something off about his expression. A blankness that wasn't like him. "Where were you?" I demanded. "You said 2 hours." "Lost track of time." His voice was flat. "The fishing was good." "Did you catch anything?" He looked down at his empty hands, seeming to notice for the first time that he wasn't carrying his tackle box or rod. "Must have left it down there. I'll get it in the morning." "Derek, what's wrong? You don't seem like yourself." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm fine, just tired. It's been a long day." The girls had fallen asleep during the movie. Derek helped me carry them to the small bedroom at the back of the RV, and we tucked them in together. When I kissed Maya's forehead, she was cold despite the blankets, and when I looked at Sophie, I could have sworn her eyes were open just a crack, staring at nothing. Derek and I got ready for bed in silence. He fell asleep almost immediately, but I lay awake, listening. The forest at night wasn't silent after all. There were sounds, small scrapings, rustlings, soft splashes from the lake, and underneath it all, a low humming that might have been wind but sounded disturbingly like voices. I must have dozed off eventually because I woke to Sophie screaming. I bolted upright, heart hammering. Derek was already out of bed, racing to the back. I followed, my legs shaking. Both girls were sitting up, Sophie sobbing, Maya's face white in the dim light from the small nightlight we'd plugged in. "What happened?" Derek asked, gathering Sophie into his arms. "The wet lady came back," Sophie wailed. "She was standing next to my bed. She tried to touch my face." "It was just a dream," Derek soothed, but he was looking at the window above the bed. It was open about 3 inches. I was certain I'd closed and locked all the windows. Maya wasn't crying, but her eyes were huge. She wasn't alone. There were other people behind her. They were all wet, and they were all smiling the same smile. They wanted to come in. "There's no one there now," I said, trying to keep my voice steady as I checked the window. The screen was intact, and when I looked out, I could see only darkness and the vague shapes of trees. But the air coming through smelled wrong. Not like pine and lake water, but like something rotten and organic, like vegetation that had been underwater too long. I locked the window. Derek carried Sophie back to our bed, and Maya followed. We all 4 squeezed into the queen-size bed, the girls between us. They finally fell back asleep, but Derek and I lay awake, not speaking, both of us staring at the ceiling. Around 3 in the morning, I heard splashing. Rhythmic, regular splashing, like someone swimming laps. I got up as quietly as I could and went to the main window, the one that overlooked the lake. The moon was nearly full, bright enough to see by. The lake was smooth as glass except for the ripples spreading from a dark shape moving through the water. As I watched, the shape dove under and the water went still again. Then, all at once, the surface erupted. Figures rose from the lake, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They were humanoid but wrong, their limbs too long, their movements too fluid. Water streamed off them as they waded toward shore, toward our campsite. Their faces were pale smudges in the moonlight, but I could see the dark holes of their mouths all open in the same wide smile. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I could only watch as they emerged from the lake and began walking up the slope toward the RV. They moved in perfect unison, their arms swinging at their sides, their heads tilted at the same angle. Some of them were dragging something behind them, dark shapes that left wet trails in the dirt. When they were about 50 feet away, they stopped. All at once, they raised their arms and began waving, that same slow, beckoning gesture I'd seen under the water. Back and forth, their pale hands luminous in the moonlight. Then, one by one, they opened their mouths wider, impossibly wide, and I heard the humming I'd heard before. But now I could make out words in it, a single phrase repeated over and over. Come swim with us. Come swim with us. Come swim with us. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen with terror. It might have been minutes or hours. Eventually, the figures began walking backward, still waving, still smiling, retreating toward the lake. They slipped under the surface one by one until the water was still again. I didn't go back to bed. I sat at the window with my knees pulled to my chest, watching the lake, waiting for them to come back. As the sky began to lighten with dawn, I saw what they'd dragged from the water. Bodies, half a dozen of them, arranged in a neat row on the beach. Even from this distance, I could tell they'd been in the water a long time. When Derek woke up, I told him everything. To my surprise, he didn't argue or try to rationalize. He just looked at me with those blank eyes and said, "We should go swimming today. The girls would like that. Derek, did you hear what I just said? There are bodies on the beach. We need to leave. We need to call for help. There's no signal." He smiled that wrong smile. "And the girls want to swim. You want to swim too. We all want to swim." "No," I said, backing away from him. "No, Derek, something's wrong with you. Something happened when you went fishing yesterday." He stood up, still smiling. "I went swimming. The water felt so good, Stella. You should try it. We all should. We could be so happy in the water." I ran to the back and woke the girls. Maya was groggy, but Sophie wouldn't wake up. Her skin was cold and clammy, and when I finally got her eyes open, they were clouded over, milky white. She smiled at me with Derek's smile and said, "Let's go swimming, Mommy." I grabbed Maya's hand and ran. Out the RV door, into the early morning light, away from the lake. Maya was crying, asking what was wrong, why we were running. I couldn't answer. I could only pull her along as we crashed through the underbrush following what I hoped was the path back to the main road. Behind us, I heard the RV door open. Derek called out, his voice flat and emotionless. "Stella, come back. We want to show you something in the water, something beautiful." We ran faster. The trees seemed to close in around us, the symbols carved into their bark watching like eyes. I couldn't tell if we were on the path anymore. Everything looked the same. Trees and shadows and more trees. Maya stumbled and I hauled her back up, my lungs burning. "Mom, I'm scared," she sobbed. "I know, baby. Me too. But we have to keep moving." That's when I heard the splashing. Not from behind us, from the lake, but from all around. I looked down and realized we were standing in water. Somehow, impossibly, we'd circled back to the lake, or the lake had come to us. The water was rising around our ankles, cold enough to ache. Figures emerged from between the trees. Dozens of them, all with that same wrong smile. They moved closer, forming a circle around us. I recognized some of them, the bodies from the beach, now animated and walking. Others were older, their skin falling off in strips, their bones visible through the gaps. And Derek. Derek was there too, Sophie in his arms. Her eyes were still white, still clouded. She was waving at me, back and forth, back and forth. "The water wants you," Derek said. "It's been calling to you since you arrived. Didn't you hear it? The lake needs to fill its lungs. It needs to breathe through us." The figures moved closer. The water was up to our knees now, rising steadily. Maya screamed, clutching my hand so hard it hurt. I could feel the cold spreading through my legs, numbing them, making it hard to move. "We could all be together," Derek continued, wading toward us. Sophie giggled, a wet, burbling sound. "Forever, swimming in the dark. Doesn't that sound peaceful?" I don't remember making the decision. One moment I was frozen, the next I was moving. I grabbed Maya and ran straight at the weakest point in the circle, between two of the older, more decayed figures. They reached for us with their long arms, their fingers catching in my hair, my clothes, but I kept moving. I heard fabric tear, felt fingernails scrape my skin, but we broke through. We ran uphill, away from the water. I could hear them behind us, their movements splashing, their voices humming that horrible song. But we were faster. Fear gave us speed they didn't have. The trees thinned. Suddenly we were on a road, gravel crunching under our feet. I saw headlights approaching and stumbled into the middle of the road, waving my arms frantically. A pickup truck screeched to a halt, and a man leaned out the window, his face alarmed. "Please," I gasped. "Help us. My husband, my daughter, the lake." "Jesus, lady, you're bleeding," he said, jumping out. Only then did I notice the blood, mine from where the figure's nails had torn my skin. Maya was crying hysterically. The man pulled out his phone. "I'm calling for help. There's a ranger station about 5 miles. "No," I grabbed his arm. "We have to go now. They're coming." "Who's coming?" I looked back the way we'd come. The tree line was dark, but I could see movement in the shadows. Shapes gathering, waiting, watching. "Just drive," I begged. "Please, just drive." He must have seen something in my face, or maybe he saw the figures too, because he nodded and hustled us into the truck. As we pulled away, I looked back through the rear window. They were standing at the edge of the forest, at the boundary between the trees and the road. Derek was in front, Sophie still in his arms. They were all waving, back and forth, back and forth. The ranger station was a nightmare of questions I couldn't answer, of skeptical looks and suggestions that I was in shock or traumatized. They sent a team to our campsite. They found the RV, doors open, generator still running. They found Derek's tackle box at the fishing spot. They found the bodies on the beach, 7 of them, all in advanced states of decomposition, all with water in their lungs despite having been on dry land. They didn't find Derek or Sophie. The search went on for days, then weeks. They dragged the lake, brought in divers, searched the entire perimeter. Nothing. It was as if they'd simply dissolved into the water. Maya doesn't talk about it. The therapists say it's selective amnesia, a trauma response. She doesn't remember running through the forest or the figures or her father's blank smile. She doesn't remember her sister going cold and pale. It's better that way. But I remember. I remember all of it. And I know they're still there, down in the dark water, swimming in the depths of Shasta Lake. I know because sometimes, late at night, I'll catch a glimpse of my own reflection in a window or a mirror, and there's water running down my face even though I'm dry. And sometimes, just for a moment, my mouth opens a little too wide, spreading into a smile I don't recognize. I feel the pull of it, the lake calling me back, wanting to fill its lungs with my breath, to pull me down into the cold dark where Derek and Sophie are waiting, where all of them are waiting, swimming in the deep, waving their pale hands. I don't go near water anymore. No lakes, no pools, not even the ocean. I sold our house and moved to the desert, to a place where the only water comes from underground and the air is so dry it hurts to breathe. But it doesn't matter. The cold is spreading anyway, working its way up from my toes, my ankles, my knees. The numbing creep of lake water in my veins. Maya is with my mother now. I couldn't risk her being near me when it happens. When the water finally fills my lungs and I start to smile that smile. When I go back to the lake to join the others, to swim in the dark, to wave at the next camper who comes looking for peace and finds only the deep. Sometimes I dream I'm already there, already swimming in the cold depths with Derek and Sophie. In the dreams, it's peaceful. The water holds us, and we don't need to breathe, don't need to think. We just exist, floating in the dark, waiting for someone new to call down to the shore, someone new to wave at. Last night I felt water dripping from my hair onto my pillow, even though I hadn't been near water in months. This morning, I found myself at the bathroom sink, filling it with water, staring down at my reflection. My eyes were starting to cloud, just a little, just enough to notice. I'm writing this because I need someone to know what happened. What's still happening? They'll find my body eventually, probably somewhere near water despite all my precautions. And maybe they'll find Maya's too, years from now, when she's old enough to hear the lake calling her name. Because the lake remembers. It knows its own. And it never stops calling them home, never stops waving those pale hands under the surface, beckoning, smiling that smile that means nothing good, that smile that says, "Come swim, come join us, come be happy in the dark where the water breathes through you and your voice joins the humming chorus that never ends." The water wants you. It's patient. It can wait as long as it needs to. And when you finally come to it, when you finally slip beneath the surface and feel the cold filling your lungs like love, like peace, like coming home, you'll understand why we're all smiling, why we never stop waving, why we're so eager for you to join us in the deep. Story 2. My name is Caleb. I'm 34, and I thought a week in the Uwharrie National Forest would fix what was broken between us. My wife, Rachel, and I had been circling each other like wounded animals for months, ever since the miscarriage. Words became landmines. Silence became a third person in our marriage. Our therapist suggested reconnecting with nature, which felt like expensive advice for what amounted to running away, but I booked the RV site anyway. Uwharrie, in central North Carolina, was close enough to Charlotte that we wouldn't feel completely isolated, but remote enough that cell service would force us to actually talk to each other. The RV was a 23-foot rental that smelled like bleach and someone else's vacation. Rachel sat in the passenger seat with her arms crossed, watching the pine trees thicken as we drove deeper into the forest. October had painted everything in shades of rust and gold, but there was something about the density of the woods here that made the colors feel muted, swallowed by shadow. "How much further?" she asked without looking at me. "About 15 minutes to the site." She nodded and went back to staring out the window. I wanted to reach over and take her hand, but the distance between us felt oceanic. The road narrowed to a single lane, barely wide enough for the RV. Branches scraped along the sides like fingernails on metal. We'd reserved Site 17, which according to the website was secluded and peaceful. What they didn't mention was that it sat at the end of a dirt road that hadn't seen maintenance in what looked like years. The RV bounced and lurched over ruts and exposed roots. Rachel braced herself against the dashboard. "Jesus, Caleb, are you sure this thing can make it?" "It's fine. We're almost there." The site opened up suddenly. A clearing ringed by towering loblolly pines and oak trees so old their trunks looked like they'd been carved from stone. A fire ring sat in the center, blackened and surrounded by rocks. There was a weathered picnic table and not much else. The nearest site was supposed to be a quarter-mile away, which meant we'd have true privacy. That had seemed like a good thing when I booked it. I killed the engine, and the silence rushed in like water filling a vacuum. No birds, no wind. Just the ticking of the cooling engine and Rachel's breathing beside me. "Well," she said, "here we are." I tried to smile. Home sweet home for the next week. We spent the next hour setting up, leveling the RV, connecting the water and electric hookups, arranging our supplies. Rachel moved through the tasks mechanically, and I found myself watching her more than helping. She'd lost weight. Her hiking pants hung loose on her hips, and her hair, which she used to wear long and wild, was pulled back in a tight ponytail that made her face look severe. "Stop staring," she said without turning around. I wasn't. You were. She closed the storage compartment with more force than necessary. I'm going to walk the perimeter, get a sense of the area. Want company? No. I watched her disappear into the trees, her orange jacket bright against the autumn understory, and felt something close to grief. This was supposed to help. This was supposed to bring us back to each other. The first night passed without incident. We made dinner on the camp stove, pasta with jarred sauce, and ate in relative silence at the picnic table. The darkness here was absolute. No light pollution, no distant highway glow. Just the stars and our small battery-powered lantern creating a bubble of light that seemed to shrink by the minute. "Did you hear that?" Rachel asked suddenly. I paused with my fork halfway to my mouth. "Hear what?" "I don't know. Something moving. Out there." She gestured vaguely toward the tree line. I listened. Nothing but the crackle of our small fire and the occasional pop from settling wood. Probably just a deer, or a raccoon. It sounded bigger. There are black bears in you, Harry, but they're more scared of us than... I know about the bears, Caleb. I did the same research you did. She stood abruptly, gathering her plate. I'm going to bed. I stayed outside longer than I should have, feeding small sticks into the dying fire and trying to convince myself that this trip wasn't already a failure. The forest pressed in around me, and I found myself thinking about all the empty space between the trees, all the darkness where anything could be hiding. When I finally crawled into the RV's small bedroom, Rachel was already asleep, or pretending to be. I lay on my back, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the forest at night, and tried not to think about how far we were from anywhere. I woke to Rachel shaking my shoulder. Dawn light filtered weakly through the bedroom curtain. "Caleb, wake up." "What? What's wrong?" "Come look at this." I followed her outside, still in my boxers and t-shirt, the morning air cold enough to raise goosebumps on my arms. She led me around to the back of the RV, where the metal siding faced the densest part of the tree line. "Look," she said, pointing. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. Then my brain made sense of the pattern. Long gouges in the metal, running parallel, 4 of them, each about 6 inches long. They were deep enough that the aluminum showed bright and raw beneath the white paint. "What the hell?" I reached out to touch them. "Don't," Rachel said. "I already did. They feel fresh, sharp." I ran my finger along the edge of one gouge. It was indeed sharp. The metal curled slightly inward like something had dragged claws down the side of the RV with enough force to penetrate the siding. "Bear," I said, but the word felt hollow even as I spoke it. "Those are too high for a bear, and too precise. Look at the spacing." She was right. The marks started about 7 feet up and ran down in perfect parallel lines. A bear would have left a more chaotic pattern, wouldn't it? These looked almost deliberate. "Could have been a branch," I offered, "in the wind last night." "There wasn't any wind." I stepped back, looking at the marks from a distance. Something about them made my stomach turn over. They looked less like claw marks and more like someone had taken a rake and dragged it down the metal with purpose. "We should report it," Rachel said, "to the ranger station." "Report what? Some scratches?" "Those aren't scratches, Caleb. Something did that." "Okay, we'll drive over to the ranger station after breakfast. It's probably nothing, but..." "Nothing? Are you serious right now?" "I didn't mean... Look, I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. Animals get curious. Maybe a buck rubbing its antlers or..." "Stop," she held up her hand. "Just stop trying to make everything okay when it's not." She walked back around to the front of the RV, and I heard the door slam. I stood there alone, staring at the marks. 4 parallel lines. I counted them again to be sure. Definitely 4. And the spacing was wrong. Too wide for a bear, too uniform. I spent the morning trying to rationalize it. We drove to the ranger station, a small cabin-style building near the forest entrance. The ranger on duty, a weathered man in his 60s named Bill, listened to our story with the kind of patient expression that suggested he'd heard it all before. "You're at Site 17?" he asked, tapping something into his computer. "That's right." He frowned slightly. "Huh. What?" Rachel leaned forward. "What is it?" "Nothing, really. Just, That site's been vacant for a while. We don't usually book it out. Why not? I asked. Maintenance issues. The septic system needs work. You didn't have any problems with the hookups, did you? No, everything worked fine. Well, good. He printed out a form and slid it across the desk. I'll send someone out to take a look at your RV. Could be a number of things. Black bears are pretty active this time of year, fattening up for winter. The marks were 7 feet up, Rachel said. Bill's expression didn't change. Bears can reach higher than you'd think when they're standing on their hind legs. I've seen them get into bear boxes mounted 8 feet up. We filled out the incident report and drove back to the site. Rachel was quiet the whole way, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Feel better? I asked. No. He said he'd send someone out. I heard him, Caleb. I was sitting right there. Then what do you want me to say? I don't want you to say anything. I want you to take this seriously. I'm taking it seriously. We reported it. We did what we were supposed to do. She turned to look at me, and there was something in her eyes I didn't recognize. You always do this. Minimize. Make it smaller so you don't have to feel uncomfortable. That's not fair, isn't it? When I told you I was scared about the pregnancy, you said it would be fine. When I said something felt wrong, you told me I was being paranoid. And then, don't, I said. Please don't. She turned back to the window. Just drive. That afternoon, we tried to pretend everything was normal. We went for a hike on one of the nearby trails, a 3-mile loop that wound through dense pine forest and along the edge of a small creek. The trail was well marked, and we passed a couple of other hikers who nodded and smiled. Normal. Everything was normal, but I couldn't shake the image of those marks. 4 parallel lines. 2 perfect, 2 intentional. We got back to the site around 4. The sun was already starting to sink toward the horizon, the light turning golden and thick. Rachel started preparing dinner while I gathered firewood from the surrounding area. I stayed within sight of the RV, collecting dead branches and small logs. That's when I found the first one. It was about 20 feet from our fire ring, partially hidden under a pile of leaves. At first I thought it was just a stick arrangement, the kind kids make when they're bored. But as I knelt down to look closer, I saw the precision of it. Bones. Small ones, maybe from squirrels or rabbits. They'd been arranged in a circular pattern, all pointing inward toward a center point where someone had placed a stone. The bones were clean, bleached white by sun and time. Rachel, I called out, come here. She emerged from the RV, drying her hands on a towel. What? Look at this. She came over and peered down at the arrangement. Her face went pale. What the fuck? I don't know. Could be kids, or maybe... Kids? Out here? She took a step back. No, this is some kind of ritual thing. You're jumping to conclusions. Am I? Look at it, Caleb. Someone arranged these. Someone put them here like this. I had to admit she was right. The pattern was too deliberate to be natural, too careful to be random. Someone had taken the time to create this. We should document it, I said, pulling out my phone. No signal, of course, but the camera still worked. I took several photos from different angles. We need to leave, Rachel said. Right now. Because of some bones? Rachel, come on. This could be months old, years old. I don't care how old it is. Someone made that. Someone was here, in our camp area, doing whatever that is. We paid for the whole week. I don't give a shit about the money. Her voice cracked. Something is wrong here. Can't you feel it? I could feel it. That was the problem. The forest had been quiet since we arrived. Too quiet. No birds, no small animals rustling in the underbrush. Just that heavy, watchful silence that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Let's sleep on it, I said. If you still want to leave in the morning, we'll pack up and go, okay? She stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Fine. But I'm not going out there again after dark. We ate dinner inside the RV, the door locked, the curtains drawn. Rachel barely touched her food. I forced myself to eat, if only to maintain some semblance of normalcy. Outside, the darkness gathered like a living thing. Around 9, I heard it. A scratching sound, rhythmic and deliberate. It came from the back of the RV, the same spot where we'd found the marks that morning. Rachel's eyes went wide. "Tell me you heard that." "I heard it." We sat frozen, listening. The scratching continued. 4 slow, measured drags down the metal. Then silence. Then 4 more. "Something's out there," Rachel whispered. I grabbed the flashlight from the counter and moved toward the door. "What are you doing?" Rachel hissed. "I'm going to look." "Are you insane? We can't just sit here." "Yes, we can. That's exactly what we should do." But I was already unlocking the door. I stepped out into the darkness, flashlight raised. The beam cut through the night, illuminating the trees and the fire ring and the picnic table. Everything looked exactly as we'd left it. I moved slowly around the side of the RV, my heart hammering. The flashlight beam shook slightly as I walked. When I reached the back corner, I stopped and took a breath before shining the light along the side panel. Fresh marks, directly below the ones from this morning. 4 more parallel gouges, the metal still bright where it had been torn. "Hello," I called out. My voice sounded small and ridiculous. "Is someone out there?" Nothing. Just the beam of my flashlight and the massive darkness pressing in from all sides. I completed the circuit around the RV and went back inside. Rachel was standing in the kitchen area holding a knife. "Well?" she demanded. "More marks, fresh ones." "That's it. We're leaving, right now." "Rachel, it's night. These roads are barely passable in daylight. If we try to drive out now, then what? We stay here and wait for whatever's doing that to get inside?" "Nothing's getting inside. The door is locked. The windows are locked. We're safe." "You don't know that." "I do know that. We're in an RV with metal walls and locked doors. Whatever animal's scratching at it can't get through. What if it's not an animal?" "Then what is it, Rachel? What do you think is out there?" She set the knife down on the counter, her hand trembling. "I don't know, but I know something is wrong. Everything about this place is wrong." We stayed up for hours, sitting in the main cabin area with all the lights on. The scratching didn't return, but somehow that made it worse. The silence felt expectant, like something was waiting just beyond the reach of our lights. Around 2 in the morning, I must have dozed off. When I woke, Rachel was gone. I sat up quickly, my heart immediately racing. "Rachel!" No answer. The bedroom door was open. I checked inside. Empty. The bathroom. Empty. She wasn't in the RV. Shit. 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 I grabbed the flashlight and threw open the door. "Rachel!" My voice echoed back to me, flat and lifeless. I swept the flashlight beam across the campsite. The fire had died down to embers. The picnic table sat empty. No sign of her. "Rachel, this isn't funny." I started walking the perimeter of the site, calling her name. The flashlight beam seemed pathetically small against the vast darkness of the forest. My mind raced through possibilities. She'd gone to pee and gotten disoriented. She'd heard something and gone to investigate. She'd decided to walk back to the ranger station alone. None of them made sense. Rachel wouldn't leave without telling me. Not after everything that had happened. I found her about 100 yards into the trees, standing perfectly still with her back to me. The flashlight illuminated her orange jacket, making her easy to spot. "Rachel! Jesus Christ, you scared me!" She didn't respond. Didn't turn around. "Rachel!" I approached slowly, something in my gut screaming at me to stop, to turn around, to run. "Honey, what are you doing out here?" When I got close enough to touch her shoulder, she finally spoke. "Do you hear them?" Her voice was flat, emotionless. "Wrong. Hear what?" "Rachel, look at me. The children, they're singing." "What children?" "Baby, there's no one here but us." "Listen." I stood there in the darkness, listening. At first, nothing. Then, faint, so faint I thought I might be imagining it. Something that could have been voices. High-pitched, distant. "That's just the wind," I said. But even as I spoke the words, I knew they were wrong. There was no wind. The air was perfectly still. "They want us to follow them," Rachel said. She started walking deeper into the forest. No, Rachel, stop." I grabbed her arm and pulled her back. She resisted, her muscles rigid. "Let me go. We're going back to the RV, now. Let me go." She spun around and the flashlight caught her face. Her eyes were wrong, pupils dilated so wide they looked black. Her mouth hung slightly open and there was a smear of something dark on her chin. "Rachel, what?" I pointed the flashlight lower. Her feet were bare, cut and bleeding, and her hands, her fingernails were torn and ragged, caked with dirt. The front of her shirt had dark stains. "Oh, God. Rachel, what did you do?" "I was digging," she said in that same flat voice. "They told me to dig. They said I could find it if I dug deep enough." "Find what?" "The baby." My blood went cold. "Rachel, the baby is gone. You know that. The baby's been gone for 4 months." "No." She shook her head slowly. "No, it's here. It's buried here. They showed me where." "Who showed you?" "The children." I grabbed her by both shoulders, fighting the urge to shake her. "There are no children. You're sleepwalking or having some kind of episode. We need to get you back to the RV." "I need to keep digging." "No. You're bleeding. Your feet. Jesus, Rachel, you're hurt." I half dragged, half carried her back to the RV. She resisted at first, then went limp in my arms, muttering about children and digging and the baby under the ground. When we got inside, I locked the door and helped her onto the bed. She curled into a fetal position, still muttering. I cleaned her feet as best I could with water and paper towels. The cuts weren't deep, but there were dozens of them. Her hands were worse, fingernails torn down to the quick, palms scraped raw. "Rachel, I'm going to give you some ibuprofen, okay? For the pain." She didn't respond. Her eyes were closed now, her breathing slow and steady. I wasn't sure if she'd fallen asleep or simply checked out. I sat beside her until dawn, watching her sleep and trying to make sense of what had happened. Sleepwalking? Maybe. But she'd never done it before. And that strange, flat affect in her voice, that wasn't like her at all. When morning light finally filtered through the curtains, I stood up on stiff legs and went to make coffee. My hands shook as I measured out the grounds. Everything felt brittle and surreal, like I was moving through a dream. I heard Rachel stirring in the bedroom. "Caleb? Yeah, I'm here." I went to the doorway. She sat up slowly, wincing. What happened?" "My feet hurt. And my hands." She looked down at her torn fingernails. "Oh my God, what did I do?" "You don't remember?" "I remember going to bed. Then, nothing. It's blank." I told her everything. Finding her in the woods, what she'd said about the children and digging. The look of horror on her face deepened with every word. "I said that? About the baby?" "Yeah." "Caleb, I'm so sorry. I don't know what. I would never. I know you wouldn't." I sat down beside her and took her hand carefully, avoiding the raw spots. "But we need to talk about leaving. This place isn't good for us." She nodded. "As soon as possible. Please." We spent the morning packing up. Rachel moved slowly, favoring her injured feet. I checked her pupils, back to normal. Whatever had happened to her in the night seemed to have passed. I was draining the water tank when I heard her call from inside the RV. "Caleb, you need to see this." I climbed back inside. She was standing at the kitchenette table staring down at something. When I got closer, I saw it was her phone. "I plugged it in to charge," she said, "and when it turned on, look at the photos." She scrolled through her photo gallery. The most recent pictures made my stomach drop. They were all from last night. Dozens of them, taken in the dark with flash. The first few showed the forest floor, dirt and roots and leaves. Then closer shots of disturbed earth like someone had been digging with their bare hands. Then, "Jesus," I breathed. A hole, maybe 2 feet deep and 3 feet wide. And at the bottom, partially unearthed? "Is that what I think it is?" Rachel's voice was barely a whisper. It looked like bones. Small ones. Too small. "We don't know what that is," I said quickly. "Could be an animal. A deer or—" "Stop." She pulled the phone away. "You saw it. You know what it looks like. We need to tell someone. The ranger." "And say what? That I sleepwalked into the woods and dug up something that might be human remains? They'll think we did something. They'll think we found something that was already there." Which is exactly what happened. I took the phone from her. I'm going to drive to the ranger station right now. You stay here and keep packing. I don't want to be alone. Then come with me. But we're reporting this before we leave." The drive to the ranger station felt longer than it had before. Rachel sat in the passenger seat, her arms wrapped around herself. Neither of us spoke. When we arrived, Bill was at the desk again. He looked up when we came in, and something in his expression shifted. "Back so soon?" I set Rachel's phone on the counter and showed him the photos. His face went carefully blank. "Where did you take these?" "Near our campsite, last night. My wife, she was sleepwalking and somehow ended up digging this up." "Sleepwalking?" His tone was neutral, giving nothing away. "Yes, she doesn't remember doing it. But these photos are on her phone, so I need you both to wait here." He picked up the phone, an actual landline, and dialed. "Sheriff, Bill Morton at U Harry Ranger Station. I need you to send someone out here." "Yeah, right now." My stomach dropped. "We didn't do anything wrong." "I didn't say you did." He hung up. "The sheriff's department will need to investigate. This is protocol for this kind of discovery." "Discovery," Rachel said. "Is that what we're calling it?" "Ma'am, I understand you're upset. Do you? Do you have any idea what it's like to dig up, to find?" Her voice broke. "I lost a baby 4 months ago, and now this. I can't. I put my arm around her. She was shaking. "Rachel, it's okay. Stop saying that. Nothing about this is okay." It took 3 hours for the sheriff's deputy to arrive. 3 hours of sitting in uncomfortable plastic chairs while Bill avoided eye contact and Rachel stared at her ruined fingernails. When the deputy finally showed up, a young woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, we had to repeat the whole story again. "So, you were sleepwalking," the deputy said, looking at Rachel. "And you somehow found this burial site." "I don't know what I found," Rachel said. "I don't remember any of it. But your husband found you digging." "Yes." "And you took photos while sleepwalking?" "I guess so. I don't know." The deputy turned to me. "Mr. Morrison, did you witness your wife taking these photos?" "No. I found her standing in the woods. She was disoriented. I brought her back to the RV." "Did she say anything unusual?" I hesitated. Rachel's hand tightened on mine. "She mentioned children," I said. "Said she could hear children singing. But she was clearly not in her right mind." The deputy made notes. "We'll need to secure the scene. I'll need you to take us back to your campsite." So we drove back, this time with the deputy following in her patrol car. Bill came too in his ranger vehicle. When we arrived at the site, I pointed toward the area where I'd found Rachel. "About 100 yards that way. I can show you the exact spot." We hiked into the woods, the deputy and Bill following. In daylight, it was easier to see where Rachel had been, a trail of disturbed leaves and broken undergrowth. We found the hole quickly. The deputy knelt beside it, shining her flashlight into the shallow excavation. She used a stick to carefully brush away some dirt, revealing more of what lay beneath. "Jesus Christ," Bill muttered. They were definitely bones, small, arranged carefully. And now that I could see them clearly, I realized they weren't buried in the sense of hidden away. They'd been placed, positioned. "This is a crime scene," the deputy said, standing up. "I need everyone to step back." "How old do you think they are?" I asked. "I'm not a forensic specialist, but I'd guess." She peered closer. "Old, maybe very old. Native American burial, possibly." "Native American?" Rachel sounded confused. "The Uhari were the original inhabitants of this area. There are dozens of documented burial sites throughout the forest. Most are protected, but new ones still get discovered from time to time." The deputy started cordoning off the area with yellow tape. "You all need to head back. I'm going to call this in, get a proper forensic team out here." "Can we leave?" I asked. "We've been here since Tuesday, and we'd really like to—" "I need you to stay available for questioning. You can go back to Charlotte if you want, but don't leave the state." So we drove home. The RV felt contaminated somehow, like we were bringing something dark back with us. Rachel sat in the passenger seat staring out the window, not speaking. When we finally pulled into our driveway, it was late afternoon. The house looked strange to me, like we'd been gone for months instead of 2 days. "I need to shower," Rachel said. She got out of the RV and went inside without waiting for me. I stood in the driveway looking at the RV's damaged side panel. The claw marks were clearly visible in the daylight, 4 parallel gouges running from top to bottom, fresh marks overlaying old ones. I took photos with my phone, documenting every angle. Then I called the rental company. "Yeah, hi. I need to report some damage to the vehicle." The person on the other end was surprisingly understanding. "Accidents happen. We'll schedule an inspection when you return it. If it's covered under the insurance waiver, you won't be charged." It wasn't an accident. Something damaged it while we were camping. "Oh, well, in that case, you'll need to file a police report for the insurance company." Another police report. Another explanation. I was so tired. That night I woke to find Rachel's side of the bed empty again. Panic immediately flooded my system. "Rachel!" I heard water running in the bathroom. When I got up and opened the door, I found her at the sink, scrubbing her hands. The water ran dark with dirt and what might have been blood. "Rachel, what are you doing? I can't get them clean." She scrubbed harder, her movements frantic. "I can't get them clean." "Your hands are clean. Look, they're bleeding. You need to stop." "There's dirt under my nails. I can feel it. I can still feel the dirt." I turned off the water and gently took her hands. They were raw, the skin around her cuticles torn open. "Baby, there's no dirt. Your hands are clean." She looked up at me and I saw tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong with me? Why did I do that? Why would I dig up—" "You didn't do anything wrong. You were sleepwalking. It wasn't your fault." "Then whose fault was it? Something made me do that. Something made me go out there and—" She pulled away from me. "I keep seeing it. The bones. They were so small. The deputy said they were probably very old. Native American burial. But what if they weren't? What if they were recent? What if—" "Stop. You can't think like that." "Why not? Why can't I think about it? Maybe I should think about it. Maybe that's the problem. We never think about what we lose. We just pretend it didn't happen and move on and— That's not fair. You know I grieved. Did you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you just went back to work and pretended everything was fine. That's not— I was trying to be strong for you. I didn't need you to be strong. I needed you to feel something." We stared at each other across the bathroom. Water dripped from the faucet, each drop loud in the silence. "I felt everything," I said quietly. "I still feel it. Every day." Her expression crumbled. "I'm sorry. I don't know why I said that. I don't know what's wrong with me. Nothing's wrong with you. You went through something traumatic. 2 traumatic things. The miscarriage and whatever happened in that forest. Do you think it was real? The children I heard. I didn't know how to answer that. The rational part of my brain said no, of course not. She'd been sleepwalking, disoriented. But another part, the part that had felt the wrongness of that forest, that had seen the claw marks and the bone arrangement, that part wasn't so sure. "I think something happened out there," I said carefully. "Something neither of us fully understands." The deputy called 2 days later. "Mr. Morrison, Deputy Chen, I wanted to update you on what we found at the site." "Okay." The remains were indeed Native American. Carbon dating puts them at approximately 400 years old. There were actually multiple individuals buried there. Appears to be a family plot. So, nothing sinister. No, though we did find something odd. The site had been disturbed recently, within the last few weeks according to our forensic team. Disturbed how? Someone had been digging there before your wife. Not as deep, but definitely deliberate excavation. We also found some items arranged around the grave. What kind of items? Animal bones, small ones, arranged in patterns. She paused. "Have you ever heard of sympathetic magic, Mr. Morrison?" "I don't—" "What? It's a practice where objects are used to create a connection or influence between people or events. The arrangement we found suggests someone was trying to— well, there's no scientific way to say this— trying to wake something up." My mouth went dry. "Wake what up? I'm not saying I believe in this stuff, but the patterns match historical records of local folk practices." There's a professor at UNC who studies this kind of thing. I sent her photos, and she identified the arrangement as what the local Native American tribes used to call a door. A door. A way to let something through. Or call something back. She sighed. Look, I know how this sounds, but there's a history in that area. Old stories about children who went missing in the forest. Some say they were stolen by spirits. Others say they were sacrificed. The point is, someone recently was out there performing what looks like a ritual. Why are you telling me this? Because your wife showed signs of what some might call spiritual disturbance. The sleepwalking, the compulsive digging, the things she said about hearing children, and because she hesitated, because 2 other people have reported similar experiences at Site 17 over the past 3 years. What happened to them? One couple left after the first night, said they heard scratching on their camper. The other, a solo camper, had to be hospitalized. They found him 3 miles into the forest, digging with his bare hands. He kept talking about children calling to him, about babies buried in the ground. My legs felt weak. I sat down heavily. Is he okay? Physically, yes. Mentally, another pause. He's still in psychiatric care. Hasn't stopped talking about the children. Jesus. We're closing Site 17 pending investigation. The area around the burial site has been designated culturally significant and will be protected. But, Mr. Morrison, I need to ask, how's your wife doing? She's having trouble sleeping, and she's been washing her hands a lot, obsessively. You might want to have her talk to someone, a therapist who specializes in trauma. We have a therapist. Good, that's good. She cleared her throat. And, Mr. Morrison, if either of you starts hearing things, voices, singing, anything like that, I want you to call me immediately. Do you understand? Why? What would that mean? It would mean whatever was trying to get through that door is still looking for a way in. After I hung up, I went to find Rachel. She was in the nursery, the room we'd started preparing before the miscarriage and hadn't been able to bring ourselves to repurpose. She sat in the rocking chair we'd bought, staring at the empty walls. Rachel. She didn't turn around. Do you hear them? My blood went ice cold. Hear what? Singing. I keep hearing singing. Rachel. It's so pretty. Like a lullaby. She started rocking slowly. They're calling for me. They want me to come back. No. I moved in front of her, kneeling down. Rachel, look at me. Look at my eyes. Her gaze slid past me, unfocused. There's no singing. You're safe. You're home. They miss me. They said I was getting so close I almost found it. Found what? The baby. Our baby. It's there, Caleb. It's waiting for us. We just have to dig deep enough. I grabbed her face gently, forcing her to look at me. Our baby isn't in that forest. Our baby is gone. What you heard, what you're hearing, it's not real, but it feels real. I know it does. I called our therapist and got an emergency appointment. Then I called Deputy Chen back and told her what was happening. She said she'd send someone to check on us. Over the next few days, Rachel deteriorated. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping, spent hours at the window staring out at nothing. Or maybe it's something I couldn't see. They're getting closer, she told me on the 4th night. They're learning how to cross over. Rachel, please, take your medication. Talk to Dr. Martinez. Medication won't stop them. They're already here. She pressed her palm against the window. Can't you see them? All the children. They're standing in our yard. I looked out the window. Our suburban street. Cars. Streetlights. No children. There's nothing there. They're waiting for me. They said if I come back, they'll show me where she is. They'll let me hold her. She's not there. How do you know? She turned to me, and her eyes were that same empty black they'd been in the forest. How do you know she's not there, waiting for me? Because she was never born. She never made it past 20 weeks. You know this. Maybe that's what they told us. Maybe that's what the doctors said. But what if they were wrong? What if she's been alive this whole time, calling for us? Rachel, stop. I can hear her crying, Caleb. At night, when it's quiet, I can hear our baby crying. Dr. Martinez recommended hospitalization. Voluntary at first. Then, when Rachel refused, involuntary. I signed the papers with shaking hands, watching as they led her away. She didn't fight, just kept muttering about children and digging and the baby underground. I stayed in the house alone, listening to the silence. And that's when I heard it. Faint at first. So faint I thought I was imagining it. But it grew louder each night, singing, high-pitched voices like children, coming from somewhere far away, or maybe from right outside. It was impossible to tell. I started sleeping with the lights on, started checking the locks multiple times before bed, started seeing shadows move in my peripheral vision. The rental company called about the RV. "Mr. Morrison, we need to talk about the damage to the vehicle." I filed a report. Yes, we saw that. The thing is, our inspector found something odd. The marks on the exterior, they're not from an animal. Cure, what do you mean? They're tool marks. Someone used some kind of metal rake or claw tool to score the metal, deliberately. That's impossible. We were alone out there. Were you? Because we also found evidence of someone being inside the RV. Fingerprints that don't match yours or your wife's. Someone was in our RV? Appears that way. Small prints. Could be a child or a small adult. We've reported it to the police. After he hung up, I sat in the kitchen trying to process. Someone had been in the RV. Someone small. And those claw marks, made with a tool, deliberately. I pulled up the photos on my phone, zooming in on the marks. Now that I knew what to look for, I could see it. The gouges were too uniform, too perfect. Not random scratching, but careful, measured strokes. Someone had wanted us to think it was an animal. Someone had wanted us to be scared. But why? I drove back to you, Harry. I don't know why. Maybe to prove to myself that it was just a place, just trees and dirt and nothing more. Maybe to understand what had happened to us there. Site 17 was closed. Yellow tape stretched across the access road. I parked and walked in anyway. The RV site looked different in daylight. Smaller, less threatening. I walked to where the bone arrangement had been and found the area excavated and then filled back in. The yellow tape here said, "Cultural Heritage Site, do not disturb." I kept walking, following the path I'd taken that night when I found Rachel. The forest was alive with birds and squirrels, normal sounds that had been absent during our stay. I found the spot where she'd been digging, now just disturbed earth marked with small flags. "You shouldn't be here." I spun around. A woman stood about 20 feet away, elderly, wearing clothes that looked handmade. Native American, I guessed from her features. "I'm sorry, I needed to see it again. Your wife dug here." "How did you—" "I know many things about this place. I've lived on this land my whole life." She walked closer. She heard the children, didn't she? "How do you know that?" "Because they call to people like her, people who have lost something, people who are hollow inside with room for them to fill." "What are they?" "Not what. Who. They were real children once, taken by disease, by hunger, by violence. Their bodies were laid to rest here, but their spirits, they never left. They were too young. They didn't understand they were supposed to move on. And they called to people who might join them, people who might become part of the forest, part of the in-between." She looked at me with sad eyes. "Your wife is in a hospital now?" "Yes. Good. That might save her. If she stays away from here, stays in the world of the living, she might recover. And if she doesn't, the hollow place inside her will grow until there's nothing left but the call. She'll find her way back here eventually. They always do. How do I stop it?" "You can't. This is her battle. But you—" She stepped closer. "You need to leave. Now. And never come back." "What about the person who was doing the rituals? Opening the door?" Her expression darkened. "That one is gone now. The forest took what was owed." "What does that mean?" "It means the door was opened, but the opener became the doorway. A sacrifice, willing or not." She turned to leave. "Go home. Forget this place. And pray your wife has the strength to do the same." I drove back to Charlotte in a daze. When I got home, there were messages from the hospital. Rachel had escaped. They found her 3 days later, back at Site 17. She'd walked the entire way, over 100 miles. Her feet were torn to pieces, her hands raw. She was digging when they found her, digging in the exact spot where she'd dug before. She's in a locked facility now. She doesn't speak anymore, just hums. It sounds like a lullaby. The doctors say she's catatonic, lost in her own mind, but I know better. She's not lost. She's there, in the forest, with the children she heard calling. She found the door, and she walked through it. Her body is here, breathing and eating and existing. But Rachel, the woman I married, the woman I loved, she's in the space between, in the hollow place where the children sing. Sometimes, late at night, I hear it too. The singing. Faint, but growing louder. And I know it's only a matter of time before I have to make a choice. Stay in this world, alone, listening to voices that aren't there, or walk back into that forest and find the door myself. I keep telling myself I'll stay, that I'll be strong, that I won't end up like Rachel, digging in the dark for something that can never be found. But every night the singing gets a little louder, and every night I feel a little more hollow. Story 3. My name is Paisley. I'm 34. The grass at Bighorn National Forest curled into letters. I noticed it on the third morning, when the coffee had gone cold in my hands and the RV's generator hummed like a dying wasp. The blades near our campsite, ordinary Wyoming fescue, the kind that should have been stiff and unremarkable, had twisted themselves into shapes. Not random swirls, letters. My name, spelled out in a cursive so precise it looked like calligraphy, Leon She. I didn't tell Marcus right away. My husband was already tense, had been since we'd pulled into the Tongue River Canyon area 2 days earlier. This trip was supposed to be our reset button, a chance to reconnect after 18 months of his mother's slow death and my miscarriage and the kind of silence that grows between two people like mold in damp spaces. The RV was a rental, a 32-foot Winnebago that smelled like artificial pine and someone else's vacations. We'd driven from Omaha with a trunk full of good intentions and a cooler full of craft beer we weren't drinking. The campsite itself was beautiful in that overwhelming way the Bighorns always are. Ponderosa pines so tall they turned the sky into strips, granite outcroppings that looked like God's knuckles pushing through the earth. We were alone here, tucked into a dispersed camping area off Forest Road 15, miles from the maintained campgrounds. Marcus had insisted on the isolation. No crowds, he'd said, no noise, just us. Just us. And apparently, grass that wrote my name. I crouched down, ran my fingers over the twisted blades. They felt normal, slightly damp with morning dew, cool to the touch, but the formation was unmistakable. P-A-I-S-L-E-Y. Each letter about 6 inches tall, the grass bent but not broken, as if someone had very carefully, very deliberately, trained each blade into position. "Babe," Marcus called from inside the RV, "you see where I put the propane adapter?" I stood quickly, brushing dirt from my knees. "Check the outside storage." My voice sounded false even to my own ears, pitched too high. I glanced back at the grass. The letters remained. I told myself it was pareidolia, the human brain's desperate need to find patterns, faces in clouds, messages in randomness. I told myself wind could do strange things. I told myself a lot of things that morning that I didn't quite believe. Marcus emerged from the RV carrying a skillet, his dark hair sticking up in sleep-wild tufts. He'd lost weight since his mother's funeral, his shirts hanging looser on his frame. There were new lines around his eyes that hadn't been there a year ago. He was 41 but looked older now, like grief had aged him in dog years. "Found it," he said, holding up the adapter. "Thought we could do pancakes. Real ones, not the instant shit." "Sounds good." I positioned myself between him and the grass formation, feeling ridiculous. What was I protecting him from? Suspiciously arranged vegetation? We made breakfast in the kind of careful silence married people develop when they're trying very hard not to fight. The pancakes came out uneven, underdone in the centers. Marcus ate them without complaint. I pushed mine around my plate, watching the grass through the RV's window. The letters were still there, still impossibly precise. After breakfast, Marcus suggested a hike. There was a trail he'd found on all trails, Bucking Mule Falls, about 4 miles round trip through dense forest to a waterfall. Good exercise, he said. Clear our heads. I agreed because refusing would have required explanation, and I didn't know how to explain the grass without sounding insane. We packed light, water bottles, trail mix, my phone for photos even though we hadn't had cell service since leaving the highway. Marcus brought his grandfather's compass, the one that still smelled like old leather and tobacco. The trail started easy, following Tongue River through a corridor of lodgepole pines. Sunlight filtered through in dusty columns, and the air smelled like sap and stone. For the first mile, I almost relaxed, almost forgot about the grass, almost believed this trip might actually work. Then Marcus stopped walking. Paisley. His voice was flat. Look at this. I came up beside him. The trail widened here into a small clearing carpeted in wildflowers, lupine and Indian paintbrush, colors so vivid they hurt to look at. But Marcus wasn't looking at the flowers. He was looking at the ground where the flowers grew. They'd arranged themselves into letters. M-A-R-C-U-S. His name spelled out in blooms, each letter about 3 feet tall. The lupine formed the M, the paintbrush the A-R-C, the lupine again for U-S. The flowers grew naturally, roots in soil, stems upright, but their placement was too perfect, too intentional. Nature doesn't spell. What the fuck? Marcus whispered. My mouth had gone dry. It's probably... Don't. He cut me off, his jaw tight. Don't tell me it's a coincidence. Don't tell me it's wind or animals or any of that shit. Look at it, Paige. Just look at it. I was looking. I couldn't stop looking. The letters shimmered slightly in the breeze, pollen dusting the air like static. Something in my chest had gone cold and heavy. There was grass this morning, I said quietly, at the campsite, bent into my name. Marcus turned to stare at me. And you didn't think to mention it. I thought I was seeing things. I thought, we need to leave. He was already backing away from the flower formation, his hand finding mine and gripping too hard. We need to pack up and get the fuck out of here. It's just plants, I said, but I was moving with him, letting him pull me back down the trail. It's just... A sound stopped us both. A child's laughter, high and clear, echoing through the pines. We froze, hands still clasped, hearts suddenly loud in the silence that followed. "Hello," Marcus called out. His voice cracked slightly. "Is someone there?" The laughter came again, closer now, moving through the trees to our left. But I couldn't see anyone. Couldn't see anything except shadows and branches and the way the light fell wrong, at angles that didn't quite make sense. "There's no one here," I said, and even as I spoke the words I knew they were true, and that made everything worse. "Marcus, there's no one." "Run!" He yanked me forward and we ran. We crashed through the undergrowth like prey animals, branches whipping our faces, rocks turning under our feet. The laughter followed us, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind, sometimes right beside us, though there was never anyone there when I looked. My lungs burned. My ankle twisted in a rut and pain shot up my leg, but I kept running because Marcus was running, and stopping felt like death. We burst out of the tree line into our campsite and both of us pulled up short, gasping. The grass had multiplied. Our names were everywhere now, twisted into the ground in letters 2 feet high, 3 feet high, covering every inch of visible soil. Paisley, Marcus, Paisley, Marcus, Paisley, Marcus, repeated in concentric circles radiating out from the RV like a targeting reticle. The grass hadn't just bent, it had grown somehow in the few hours we'd been gone. Grown impossibly fast, impossibly precise, spelling out our identities over and over until the words lost meaning and became just shapes, just patterns, just wrong. "Get in the RV," Marcus said. His voice had gone very quiet, very controlled, the way it did when he was terrified. "Get in right now." We scrambled inside, Marcus fumbling with the keys, his hands shaking so badly he dropped them twice. I locked the door behind us with fingers that didn't feel like mine anymore. Through the window, I could see the names continuing to form. Grass blades bending and twisting in real time now, writing us into existence on the earth itself. The engine turned over. Once, twice. Died. No. Marcus tried again. The starter ground weakly. No, 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 no. Let it rest, I said, though every instinct screamed to run. You'll flood it. He slumped forward, forehead against the steering wheel. I put my hand on his back and felt him trembling. We'd been married 9 years. I'd seen him cry twice. Once at his mother's bedside, once in the bathroom after the miscarriage. He wasn't crying now, but he was close. "What's happening to us?" he whispered. I had no answer. Through the windshield, the grass kept writing. Our names, again and again, in an endless loop of accusation or invitation or warning. The sun was starting to set, painting the bighorns in shades of blood and amber. In a few hours it would be dark. I tried not to think about what darkness might bring to a place where the earth knew our names. Marcus tried the engine again. This time it caught, coughing blue smoke before settling into a rough idle. "We're leaving," he said. "Right fucking now." He put the RV in gear and pressed the accelerator. We lurched forward 6 feet before the engine died again. Marcus screamed, an actual scream, raw and frightened, and slammed his palms against the wheel. The horn blared, echoing across the canyon, and then died into silence that felt thicker than before. "The tires," I said softly. We both looked. All 6 tires, the 4 on the ground, the 2 spares mounted on the back, had sunk into the earth. Not deflated. Sunk. The grass had grown up around them, through them, wrapping the rubber in a stranglehold of green. The RV listed slightly to one side, groaning like a ship taking on water. "This isn't real." Marcus's voice had gone somewhere else entirely, high and tight. "This isn't real. We're having a carbon monoxide leak or something. We're hallucinating." "We're not hallucinating." "Then what?" He whirled on me, eyes too wide. "What the fuck is this, Paisley? What did we do? Why is this happening?" I wanted to comfort him. I wanted to have answers. Instead, I stared at the grass spelling our names in the dying light and felt something fundamental break inside my understanding of how the world worked. Night came like a fist closing. We huddled in the RV with every light blazing, burning through our battery because the alternative was sitting in the dark while the grass wrote our names. We'd tried the engine 17 more times. It wouldn't turn over. We'd tried our phones. No signal, not even emergency. Marcus had found a road flare in the emergency kit and clutched it like a talisman, unlit, his knuckles white. "We'll walk out in the morning," he said for the 5th time. "First light, we'll walk to the highway. It's only 7 miles. "Okay," I said. I didn't believe him. I didn't believe we'd make it 7 miles in a place where plants spelled your name and children laughed in empty forests. But I said, okay, because what else was there to say? Around midnight, the scratching started. Soft at first, almost negligible, just a faint scraping against the RV's aluminum siding. But it grew, intensified, became a sound like fingernails, like dozens of fingernails, dragging in long strokes up and down the vehicle's exterior. Marcus grabbed the flare, sparked it. Red light flooded the interior, garish and hellish. "Don't look outside," I whispered, but I was already looking. The grass had grown another 3 feet. It pressed against the windows now. Blades as tall as wheat, bending and scraping against the glass in rhythmic waves. And in the red light of the flare, I could see patterns in the grass. Not just our names anymore. Whole sentences, written in that same impossible cursive. "We know what you did, Paisley. Tell him the baby knows my heart stopped." Actually stopped, or felt like it did. My chest going hollow and cold. Marcus was staring at the words too, his face slack with incomprehension. "What baby?" he said slowly. "Pays? What baby are they talking about?" I don't, but I did know. Oh, God, I knew exactly what baby. Paisley. His voice changed, hardened. "What baby?" The grass scraped louder. The sentences multiplied, covering every window now. "She took them, both of them. One you knew about, one you didn't." "No," I breathed. "No, please, I can't." "What baby?" Marcus roared, and the flare fell from his hand, rolled across the floor still burning. filling the RV with smoke and chemical stink. I'd been pregnant twice. He knew about the second one, the miscarriage at 12 weeks that had gutted us both, that had sent us spiraling into this failing marriage. He didn't know about the first one, the one 7 years ago, when we'd been struggling, when his job had been uncertain, when I'd been terrified and 27 and had made an appointment I'd never told him about, had made a choice I'd carried alone ever since. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Marcus, I'm so sorry. I was scared. I thought—" "You were pregnant before?" His face had gone pale under the smoke and red light. "And you didn't tell me? You didn't—" Understanding crashed over him like cold water. "Oh, fuck. You didn't just not tell me." The grass screamed. That's the only word for the sound it made. A screaming of blades against metal, against glass, a shrieking vegetal howl that vibrated through the RV's frame. Cracks spiderwebbed across the windshield. The walls groaned. I was 27. I was crying now, words tumbling out in a desperate flood. You'd just been laid off. We were barely making rent. I was terrified. "So you killed our baby and never told me." His voice was very flat, very cold. "You made that choice alone. I was going to tell you, I swear, the timing was never, and then we got better, and then your mom got sick, and then—" The RV lurched, tilted. The grass was pulling us down now, dragging the vehicle into the earth inch by inch. Outside, in the darkness beyond the cracked windshield, I saw shapes moving. Not grass, something else. Small figures, child-sized, standing in the spaces between the letters spelling out my crimes. "They're out there," Marcus breathed. "The babies. Jesus Christ, Paisley, they're out there. They're not babies. They can't be. This isn't—" "Then what are they?" He grabbed my shoulders, shook me. "What the fuck are they if they're not the children you took from me?" One of the shapes moved closer to the window. In the dying light of the flare, I saw its face. Or the suggestion of a face. Features that shifted like smoke, that were almost recognizable. It pressed tiny hands against the glass. Left prints that glowed faintly green. The second figure appeared on the other side of the RV, smaller than the first. And now I was sobbing, because some part of me, some sick, guilt-rotted part, recognized them both. The 7-year-old ghost of a choice I'd made, the 2-year-old ghost of a loss I'd suffered. Both here, both real, both pressing against the glass with hands that had never learned to hold anything. "I'm sorry," I gasped. I'm sorry. Please. I'm so sorry." Sorry doesn't bring them back. Marcus had moved away from me, pressed himself against the far wall, looking at me like I was the monster, like I was the thing that had written our names in grass and dragged us into this nightmare. And maybe I was. Maybe guilt was a seed that grew roots, that reached down into the earth and told the earth our secrets. The RV tipped further. 30 degrees. 40. Equipment slid across the floor, the flare rolling into a puddle of something that caught fire, small flames spreading across the linoleum. Smoke filled the interior, thick and choking. Outside, the grass had grown tall enough to block out the stars, creating a cage of green, a prison written in accusation. "We have to get out," I coughed. "Marcus will burn." "Good." He wasn't moving. "Let it burn. Let me burn with them. With the family you destroyed." I didn't destroy, but I had, hadn't I? I'd made choices, and those choices had consequences that rippled forward through time until they became this moment, this burning RV, this husband looking at me with eyes full of hate and betrayal and grief I'd caused twice over. The fire spread faster. The heat became unbearable. I grabbed the door handle. It was hot enough to sear my palm, but I yanked it anyway, fell out into the grass that wrote my name. Behind me, Marcus screamed my name once, twice, but I couldn't go back in. The smoke was too thick, the flames too high. I crawled away from the RV on hands and knees, grass blades slicing my palms, and the small figures followed me through the letters spelling Paisley. Paisley, Paisley, in endless repetition. Behind me, something exploded. The propane tank, probably. The RV became a column of fire that lit up the entire canyon, turning night to orange day. I curled into a ball in the grass and screamed until my throat was raw, and even then I kept screaming because if I stopped, I'd have to think about whether Marcus had gotten out, whether he'd burned, whether I'd killed him too. The grass grew around me, through me. I felt blades pushing up through my skin, emerging from my pores like horrible hair. They spelled words across my body: murderer on my left arm, liar down my spine, mother across my stomach in letters that burned. The children stood over me, watching, their not-quite faces flickering between human and plant and something that was neither. "I'm sorry," I whispered one last time. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." The grass filled my mouth. I woke to sunlight and silence. I was lying on bare dirt. No grass, no letters, no names. The RV was gone. Not burned, not destroyed, just gone. In its place was a perfect circle of scorched earth about 30 feet wide, with me in the center like the stigmata of some terrible stigmata. Marcus stood at the edge of the circle, staring at me. He was whole, unburned, alive. "Get up," he said quietly. I tried to speak, but my throat was shredded. I got to my feet slowly, every muscle screaming. When I looked down at my arms, the words were still there. Murderer, liar, mother. Written not in grass, but in scars, raised and pink and permanent. "We're walking to the highway," Marcus said. "We're going to tell them there was an accident. We're going to say the RV broke down and we hiked out. And then we're getting a divorce." He wouldn't look at me directly. Wouldn't meet my eyes. "I can't be married to you anymore, Paisley. I can't even look at you." "Marcus." "Don't." His voice cracked. "Don't say anything. Don't apologize. Don't try to explain. Just walk." So I walked. We both walked, following Forest Road 15 back toward the highway, toward civilization, toward the life we'd had that was now irrevocably shattered. The morning was beautiful. Clear sky, warm sun, birds singing in the pines, nature, innocent and indifferent to what had happened in its midst. We walked 7 miles in silence. When we reached the highway, Marcus flagged down a ranger. I sat on a guardrail and stared at my scarred arms while he told our story. Mechanical failure. Forced to hike out. His wife wasn't feeling well. The ranger radioed for assistance, gave us water, asked if we needed medical attention. "She does," Marcus said, pointing at me without looking. "She's injured." The ranger examined my arms, his face puzzled. "These look old," he said. "Are these from before the trip?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. How could I explain that I'd earned these scars in a single night? That guilt could grow through your skin like grass through concrete? That the earth remembered your sins better than you did? "Before," I finally whispered. "They're from before." They drove us to a hospital in Sheridan. The doctors treated me for smoke inhalation I shouldn't have had, and dehydration that made sense, and cuts on my palms that had healed too fast. They asked questions I couldn't answer. Marcus sat in a chair in the corner of my room and stared at the wall for 8 hours until they discharged me. We flew home separately. He went back to Omaha. I went to my sister's place in Portland. The divorce papers arrived 3 weeks later. I signed them without reading them. He got everything: the house, the car, the bank accounts. I didn't contest any of it. How could I? What was worth fighting for after the earth had judged me guilty? The scars never faded. I wear long sleeves now, even in summer. Sometimes I catch people staring at my wrists where the words peek out, and I see them trying to read the letters, to understand what they say. I never explain. I don't go near grass anymore. Can't bring myself to walk through it, can't stand to touch it. I live in a studio apartment with concrete floors and artificial plants and windows that face brick walls, so I never have to see anything green and growing. But sometimes, late at night, I feel something pushing up through my skin. New words, new accusations, new names I took and never gave back. I scratch at my arms until they bleed, but the grass keeps growing, keeps spelling out the truth I tried to bury. The earth remembers. The grass knows. And somewhere in Wyoming, in a canyon between mountains so beautiful they hurt, The ground still spells our names in letters tall enough to see from the sky. Paisley, Marcus. Paisley, Marcus, written in green and growing, waiting for the next person who thinks their secrets are buried deep enough that nature won't dig them up and spell them out for all creation to read. I am Paisley. I am 34 years old. I came to Bighorn National Forest to save my marriage and learned instead that some things can't be saved, can't be buried, can't be forgotten. The grass curled into letters, and the letters told the truth, and the truth cost me everything. Now I live with what's left, a body marked by confession, a conscience that grows like weeds, and the certain knowledge that wherever I go, whatever I do, the earth is watching, remembering, waiting to write my sins in strokes of green and gold. The grass at Bighorn National Forest curled into letters, and those letters spelled the end of everything I thought I was. Story 4. My name is Wyatt. I'm 34. The air at Devil's Backbone Wilderness area in central Texas reeked of sulfur. That's the first thing I noticed when I stepped out of the RV that September afternoon. Not the heat, not the vastness of the limestone hills stretching toward the Blanco River, but that smell, like matches struck in succession, or eggs left to rot in summer sun. My girlfriend Rachel wrinkled her nose as she climbed down from the passenger side. "Jesus, what is that?" she asked, waving her hand in front of her face. "Probably natural gas seeping up through the rock," I said, though I didn't really know. "This whole area sits on top of karst formations, caves everywhere underneath us." Rachel didn't look convinced, but she nodded and started unloading our camping chairs from the storage compartment. We'd driven 3 hours from Austin to get here, to this remote stretch of hill country wilderness that promised solitude and star-filled skies. The RV park, if you could call it that, consisted of just 6 numbered concrete pads carved into a cedar-thick hillside, separated by enough distance that you couldn't see your neighbors. Only 2 other sites appeared occupied, a fifth-wheel trailer at Spot 3 and a small Class C motorhome at Spot 5. We'd taken Spot 1, the farthest from the primitive bathroom facility and closest to the trailhead that led down to the river. It was exactly what we'd wanted. Rachel and I had been together for 2 years, and lately things had felt strained. Not bad, exactly, but tired. The kind of tired that comes from falling into routines, from knowing each other's sentences before they're finished. This trip was supposed to refresh us, remind us why we'd fallen in love in that cramped graduate school apartment where we'd first met. She was finishing her doctorate in anthropology. I taught high school chemistry and spent my summers doing absolutely nothing productive. "I'm going to set up inside," Rachel said, hauling a duffel bag toward the RV door. "You want to get the water hookup?" I nodded and grabbed the hose from the storage bay. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and within minutes I was sweating through my shirt. The sulfur smell seemed to intensify as I worked, making my eyes water. I kept expecting it to dissipate, for my nose to adjust, but it only grew stronger. The ground beneath the RV steamed slightly where patches of bare limestone showed through the sparse grass. By the time I'd finished with the hookups and stabilizing jacks, the sun had started its descent toward the hills. Rachel emerged with 2 beers, and we sat in our camping chairs, watching the light turn golden through the cedar branches. The sulfur smell had faded somewhat, or maybe I'd finally gotten used to it. "It's beautiful here," Rachel said, and she was right. The wilderness area stretched out below us in waves of green and gray, the Blanco River cutting a silver thread through the valley. Turkey vultures circled lazily in the thermals. If you ignored the faint rotten egg stench, it was perfect. "Should we walk down to the river before dark?" I suggested. Rachel shook her head. "Let's wait until morning. I'm exhausted. Early start?" "Sounds good." We made dinner on the RV's propane stove, just pasta and jarred sauce, nothing fancy, and ate while watching the sun disappear. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped quickly, the way it does in the hill country. We could hear the occupants of the other RVs moving around, doors opening and closing, but we couldn't see them through the trees. The isolation felt complete. Around 10 o'clock, I stepped outside to brush my teeth. The stars were extraordinary, unobscured by city lights, the Milky Way a bright smear across the sky. But the sulfur smell had returned, stronger than before. It burned my nostrils and made my throat itch. I spit toothpaste into the gravel and looked around, trying to locate the source. That's when I noticed the steam. It rose from the ground in thin wisps all around our RV, illuminated by the light spilling from our windows. Not just from the bare patches of limestone, but from everywhere. From the grass, from between the cedar roots, from the gravel of the parking pad itself. The earth was exhaling, and its breath reeked of brimstone. "Rachel," I called, my voice sounding small in the vast darkness. "You should see this." She appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the RV's interior lights. "What's wrong?" "Look at the ground." She stepped down and saw what I was seeing. The steam rose in lazy spirals, thickening as we watched. Within minutes, a low fog had formed, hugging the earth like a living thing. "That's weird," Rachel said, but her tone was more curious than concerned. "Must be the temperature differential. Cold air meeting warm ground." "The ground shouldn't be this warm," I said. "It's 70 degrees out here." "Geothermal activity, then. You said yourself there are caves underneath." I wanted to believe her rational explanation, but something felt wrong. The steam didn't move like normal fog. It seemed to flow deliberately, as if following invisible channels in the earth, and the smell had intensified to the point where it was difficult to breathe without coughing. We went back inside and closed the windows, but the sulfur smell seeped through the RV's seals. Rachel suggested we run the air conditioning to circulate the air, but that only seemed to draw more of the stench inside. Eventually, we gave up and went to bed, breathing through our mouths, trying to ignore the way our eyes watered and our throats burned. I didn't sleep well. The smell invaded my dreams, turning them dark and suffocating. I dreamed of being buried alive, of dirt filling my mouth and nose, of something beneath the earth trying to pull me down through the RV's floor. When I jerked awake around 3 in the morning, I was disoriented and nauseous. Rachel slept beside me, one arm flung across her face. I got up and stumbled to the bathroom, splashing water on my face. Through the small window above the sink, I could see the steam still rising from the ground, thicker now, almost solid in its density. It glowed faintly in the starlight, yellowish and ugly. And then I saw the figure. It stood at the edge of our campsite where the cedar trees grew dense. Just a silhouette, but distinctly human-shaped. Tall and thin, unnaturally still. Watching our RV. My heart hammered. I leaned closer to the window trying to make out details, but the steam obscured everything beyond 20 feet. The figure didn't move, didn't shift weight or adjust position. It simply stood there, and even though I couldn't see its face, I knew it was looking directly at me. I watched for maybe 30 seconds, frozen, before the figure took a step backward and disappeared into the trees. Not walking, exactly. More like it was absorbed by the darkness, pulled into it. I went back to bed, but didn't sleep. I lay there listening to Rachel's breathing, to the creaks and groans of the RV settling, to sounds outside that might have been wind in the cedars or might have been something else. When gray light finally seeped through the windows around 6:30, I felt like I'd been awake for days. Rachel stirred beside me. God, what is that smell? It was worse in the morning. The sulfur had concentrated overnight, becoming almost visible as a yellow-tinged haze that filled the RV. We threw open all the windows and doors, gasping for fresh air, but outside wasn't much better. The steam had dissipated with the sunrise, but the ground still steamed slightly, and the smell seemed to emanate from the earth itself. "We should move sites," Rachel said, coughing. "This is unbearable. Let me check with the camp host." I walked up the gravel road toward the small trailer that served as the ranger station. The morning was beautiful. Birds singing, sun warm on my shoulders, the river sparkling in the valley below. But the sulfur smell followed me like a shadow. As I passed Spot 3, I noticed the fifth wheel's door was open, swinging slightly in the breeze. No one appeared to be around. The ranger station was locked, a handwritten sign taped to the door. Back at 4 p.m. I knocked anyway, waited, then peered through the windows. Empty. On my way back, I detoured past Spot 5, where the Class C motorhome sat. It was an older model, maybe from the 90s, with faded paint and patches of rust. The windows were curtained, but I could hear a television playing inside, the manic energy of a game show. I knocked on the door. "Hello? Sorry to bother you, but are you experiencing any weird smells?" The TV volume lowered. Footsteps approached the door, but it didn't open. "Who is it?" A man's voice, rough and suspicious. "I'm in spot 1. Just wondering if you're smelling sulfur? Like rotten eggs?" Silence. Then, "You need to leave." "I'm sorry?" "Leave this place. Today. Don't wait until dark." "What are you talking about?" "The ground is angry. It's been angry for a long time. You need to go." I waited for him to elaborate, but the TV volume increased again. Conversation clearly over. I stood there for a moment, unnerved, then walked back to our site. Rachel had made coffee on the propane stove and was standing outside, wrapped in a hoodie despite the climbing temperature. What'd they say? Ranger's not here until 4, but I talked to the guy in spot 5. He's weird. Told us we should leave. Leave? Why? I shrugged. Something about the ground being angry. Rachel laughed, but it sounded forced. Local eccentric, probably. Worried we're disrupting the natural order or whatever. Yeah, probably. We decided to go for that hike to the river, thinking some distance from the sulfur-saturated campsite would clear our heads. The trail descended steeply through cedar and scrub oak, switchbacking down the limestone hills. Within a few minutes the air changed, still hot but cleaner, without that pervasive, rotten smell. We could breathe normally again. The Blanco River ran clear over smooth limestone, forming pools deep enough to swim in. We found a flat rock in the sun and sat there, dangling our feet in the cold water. For a while, things felt normal. Rachel talked about her dissertation research on death rituals in indigenous Texas cultures, and I half-listened, content to watch the water flow over the rocks. This was what we'd come for. Peace, simplicity, connection. But I couldn't stop thinking about the figure I'd seen in the night. The way it had stood so perfectly still, as if it weren't quite real. And the man's warning, "Don't wait until dark." "Do you believe in evil places?" I asked, interrupting Rachel mid-sentence. She looked at me, surprised. "What kind of question is that?" "I mean, places where bad things happen, where the land itself is somehow wrong." "You mean like cursed?" She smiled. "You're asking an anthropologist if I believe in supernatural geography?" "I'm serious." Her smile faded. "Why? What's wrong?" I told her about the figure I'd seen, about the weird conversation with the man in spot 5. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing more concerned. "You didn't wake me?" she said when I finished. "You were sleeping. I didn't want to scare you." "Well, I'm scared now." She pulled her feet from the water. "Maybe we should leave. Find a different campground." "Where?" "Everything within 100 miles is probably booked for the weekend." "A hotel, then. I don't care." I wanted to agree, but something stubborn in me resisted. We'd paid for 2 nights, and it was probably just natural gas causing the smell. The figure had likely been a deer or my imagination. The man in the motorhome was clearly paranoid or mentally ill. Running away felt like an overreaction. "Let's see how the day goes," I said. "If it's still bad tonight, we'll pack up and head home tomorrow." Rachel didn't look happy, but she nodded. We stayed at the river until early afternoon, then hiked back up the trail. The climb was brutal in the midday heat, and by the time we reached our campsite we were both exhausted and dehydrated. The sulfur smell hit us like a wall. It had intensified during our absence, becoming so thick it was almost visible. A yellow-tinged haze that hung over our RV like a toxic cloud. My eyes immediately began to water, and Rachel doubled over, coughing. "Jesus Christ," I gasped. "This isn't natural." We stumbled into the RV and slammed the door, but there was no escaping it. The smell had permeated everything. Our clothes, the cushions, the bedding. It was in our lungs, coating the back of our throats. "We're leaving," Rachel said, her voice hoarse. "Right now. I don't care about the money." I nodded, already moving to disconnect the water and power. But when I stepped outside, I noticed something that made me freeze. The steam was back, despite the afternoon heat. It rose from the ground in thick columns, glowing faintly yellow in the sunlight. And it wasn't random. The steam formed patterns, like ribs or veins, following some invisible structure beneath the earth. As I watched, a fresh plume erupted from the ground near the RV's rear wheel, hissing as it rose. I bent down and touched the gravel where the steam emerged. It was hot. Not just warm, but genuinely hot, enough to make me pull my hand back. The stones themselves seemed to pulse slightly, as if something beneath them was breathing. "Wyatt, come on," Rachel called from inside the RV. I started disconnecting the utilities, working as fast as I could while holding my breath to avoid the worst of the sulfur. The hoses and cables seemed to resist, tangling in ways they hadn't during setup. My hands shook, whether from the toxic air or rising panic I couldn't tell. That's when I heard the screaming. It came from Spot 5, high-pitched and terrified, cutting through the heavy air. Rachel appeared in the doorway, her face white. "What was that?" "Stay here," I said, and started running toward the motorhome. The screaming continued, interspersed with crashes and thuds. As I got closer, I could see the vehicle rocking on its suspension, as if something inside was throwing itself against the walls. The door hung open, banging in rhythm with the impacts. "Hello?" I shouted. "Are you okay?" The screaming stopped abruptly. The motorhome went still. I approached cautiously, every instinct telling me to turn around and run. The sulfur smell was overwhelming here, so thick I had to breathe through my shirt. Steam rose from the ground in dense clouds, obscuring the motorhome's lower half. "Sir, do you need help?" No response. I reached the door and peered inside. The interior was destroyed. Cabinets torn open, their contents scattered across the floor. The furniture was overturned, cushions shredded. And in the back, where the bedroom would be, I could see legs. Someone lying on the floor, not moving. Oh, shit! I climbed inside, my shoes crunching on broken glass. "Sir, can you hear me?" As I got closer, I realized the legs were at the wrong angle. Twisted backward at the knee, the feet pointing in directions feet shouldn't point. I could see the man now, elderly, maybe 70, wearing pajamas. His face was purple, eyes bulging, tongue protruding. The smell here was worse than sulfur. It was the smell of released bowels, of violent death. But what made me stumble backward, what made my gorge rise, was his hands. They were buried in his own chest. Fingers disappeared into ragged holes just below his ribcage. He'd clawed himself open, torn through skin and muscle, and I could see the white gleam of exposed bone. I ran, burst out of the motorhome and bent over, vomiting into the steam-covered gravel. Behind me, I heard Rachel calling my name, but I couldn't respond. I could only retch and gasp, my mind trying to process what I'd seen. When I could finally breathe again, I looked up and saw Rachel running toward me. I held up a hand to stop her. "Don't go in there. He's dead." "What? Who's dead?" "The man from Spot 5. I think he killed himself." Rachel's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, we need to call someone." I pulled out my phone. No signal. Of course there was no signal. We were in the middle of a wilderness area, in a valley surrounded by hills. The ranger station was locked. The nearest town was 20 miles away. "We need to drive out and find help," I said. "Come on." We ran back to our RV. I'd only partially disconnected the utilities, but I didn't care. I just started the engine and put it in gear, ready to tear free of the water and power lines if necessary. The engine turned over, but didn't start. Tried again. Same result. "What's wrong?" Rachel's voice was climbing toward hysteria. "I don't know." I tried a third time, pumping the gas pedal. The engine coughed, sputtered, and died. That's when I noticed the steam was rising through the RV's floor vents. Not metaphorically, actual sulfurous steam pouring into the cabin from below. And with it came a sound, low and rhythmic, like breathing. The RV's frame creaked, metal groaning as if under tremendous pressure. "Get out," I said. "Now." We stumbled out into the afternoon heat. The steam had grown so dense we could barely see 10 feet in any direction. It swirled around our legs, hot and acrid, making our skin itch. The ground beneath our feet felt wrong, soft in places, as if the earth were becoming liquid. "The other RV," Rachel gasped. "The fifth wheel. Maybe we can use their truck." We ran toward Spot 3, holding hands so we wouldn't lose each other in the steam. The fifth wheel materialized like a ghost ship, its white exterior barely visible through the yellow fog. The door was still open, as it had been this morning. "Hello?" Rachel called out. "We need help." No answer. We approached the door. Inside, the scene was similar to the motorhome: destruction and chaos, but no body this time. Instead, we found blood. A lot of blood, in a trail leading from the bedroom to the door and then outside, disappearing into the steam-covered ground. "They left," I said, though I didn't believe it. "They must have been injured and went for help." "Wyatt, look." Rachel pointed to the wall above the dinette table. Someone had written there, in what I very much hoped was red paint but suspected was blood. "The ground speaks." We did not listen. Now it feeds. "We need to go." Rachel's voice was barely a whisper. "We need to leave right now." "The truck's gone," I said, looking out the window at the empty parking pad where a vehicle should have been. "And we passed it on the road coming in. There's only one way out, and it's 5 miles to the highway. Then we walk." "Through this?" I gestured at the steam, which had grown so thick it was like being inside a cloud. The sulfur smell was suffocating, making it hard to think. "We can barely see. We don't know what's out there." "What's out there?" Rachel's voice rose to a shout. "What's out there? Jesus Christ, Wyatt, a man just clawed his own chest open and someone else left a message in blood. We need to—" She stopped abruptly, her eyes fixed on something behind me. I turned. A figure stood in the steam, tall and impossibly thin, its silhouette warping and stretching in ways that human bodies don't. It stood perfectly still, just as the one I'd seen last night had stood, but now I could see details. Its skin was wrong. Too smooth, too gray, reflecting light like polished stone. Its arms hung too long at its sides, reaching past where its knees should be. And its face. It had no face. Just a smooth expanse of that stone-like skin, with 2 dark pits where eyes might have been. We ran. Back out into the steam, no direction in mind except away. The ground had become soft and yielding, like running through mud, and the steam burned our skin where it touched. Behind us, I could hear footsteps. Multiple footsteps, more than one set pursuing with the relentless rhythm of a heartbeat. Rachel stumbled and went down. I hauled her up, and we kept running, deeper into the cedar forest. Branches whipped our faces. Roots caught our feet. The steam was everywhere, rising from the earth in columns, and I realized with horror that we were no longer on any trail. We'd run blindly into the wilderness, and now we were completely lost. "Stop!" Rachel gasped. I can't breathe." We collapsed against a cedar tree, our lungs burning from the sulphurous air. The footsteps had stopped, but that was worse somehow. The silence felt predatory, like something was waiting for us to reveal our position. The steam around us began to glow. Not with reflected light, but with its own internal luminescence, a sickly yellow-green that reminded me of infected wounds. And in that glow, shapes moved. Not the tall figures we'd seen before, but something else. Something that crawled and skittered across the ground, leaving trails in the soft earth. Rachel gripped my arm. "What are those?" I didn't answer because I didn't want to say what I was thinking. They looked like hands. Dozens of hands, severed at the wrist, pulling themselves through the dirt with their fingers. Some were fresh, pink and whole. Others were decomposed, just bones and sinew. They moved with horrible purpose, feeling their way through the steam like blind things. One of them touched my shoe. I kicked it away reflexively and it tumbled through the steam, fingers still grasping. More were coming, drawn by the movement. They surrounded us, a carpet of crawling hands reaching and clutching. "Up," I said, grabbing the lowest branch of the cedar. "Climb." We scrambled up the tree as the hands converged on the spot where we'd been sitting. They piled on each other, forming a mound, reaching upward with desperate energy. Rachel climbed higher, and I followed, not stopping until we were 20 feet off the ground. From this vantage point we could see over the steam. The sun was setting, painting the hills in shades of orange and red, and in that dying light I could see figures standing throughout the forest. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Those tall, impossibly thin shapes arranged in concentric circles around our position, all facing us, all perfectly still. "Oh, God," Rachel whimpered. "What are they?" I didn't know. Spirits, demons, something that had been sleeping under the earth until the sulfur woke it. I had no explanation that made sense. But I remembered Rachel's dissertation research, her focus on indigenous death rituals. "You studied the local tribes," I said. "The Tonkawa. Did they have any legends about this place?" "The Tonkawa?" Rachel's eyes unfocused, reaching for academic memory even in the midst of terror. "They had stories about places where the dead went into the earth. Feeding places. The ground would open and take those who weren't properly consecrated." "Consecrated how?" "I don't know. Blood, maybe? Offerings. It was metaphorical. At least, that's what we always assumed. A way of explaining natural phenomena like caves and sinkholes. Below us, the hands had started climbing the tree. They moved slowly but with terrible determination, fingers finding purchase in the bark. The tall figures remained motionless, watching. "This isn't metaphorical," I said. The sun touched the horizon. As darkness fell, the steam began to glow brighter, and the sulfur smell intensified until it was almost solid. The hands climbed higher. I could hear Rachel crying softly beside me, and I wanted to comfort her, but I had nothing to say. We were going to die here, in this tree, in this cursed place where the earth fed on the living. That's when I remembered the lighter in my pocket. I always carried one, a habit from my smoking days even though I'd quit 2 years ago. I pulled it out with trembling fingers. "What are you doing?" Rachel asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "But fire purifies things, right? In a lot of cultures? Wyatt, we're in a tree. If you start a fire, we're dead, anyway." I flicked the lighter. The flame was tiny, insignificant against the vast darkness settling over the forest. But as soon as it appeared, the hands stopped climbing. They hung motionless on the tree trunk, as if frozen. The tall figures in the forest took a step backward, all at once. I held the lighter higher, and they retreated further. The steam seemed to thin slightly around the flame, as if repelled by it. "They don't like it," Rachel whispered. I thought about the man in the motorhome, about the blood trail from the fifth wheel, about that message on the wall. The ground speaks. Maybe fire was the opposite of whatever spoke through the sulfurous earth. Maybe it was the one thing these creatures feared. "We need to make a bigger fire," I said. "How? We're in a tree." I looked around desperately. The cedar branches were thick and resinous. They'd burn fast and hot. If we could set the tree on fire, maybe the flames would drive the creatures back long enough for us to run. It was insane, but insanity was all we had left. "Hold on tight," I said, and touched the lighter flame to a branch. The cedar ignited instantly, flames racing along the branch with greedy enthusiasm. Heat washed over us, intense and immediate. Rachel screamed, but I was already moving, climbing higher as the fire spread. The whole tree became a torch, and the hands fell away, dropping into the steam with dull thuds. The tall figures retreated into the forest, their stone-smooth bodies gleaming in the firelight. As they withdrew, the steam began to dissipate. The sulfur smell faded. The ground beneath the tree solidified, no longer soft and yielding. We jumped. It was only 15 feet or so, but it felt like flying. I hit the ground hard, rolled, and came up running. Rachel was beside me, her hair singed but her eyes clear. Behind us, the burning tree illuminated the forest like a beacon, and we ran toward where we thought the campground should be. We found the road more by luck than navigation. The steam had cleared enough to see the gravel path cutting through the cedars, and we followed it upward, toward where our RV waited. The tall figures didn't pursue. They stayed in the darkness beyond the tree's light, watching us go. Our RV sat exactly where we'd left it, undamaged. The steam had vanished completely, and the sulfur smell was gone. If not for our singed clothes and raw throats, I might have convinced myself we'd hallucinated the whole thing. The engine started on the first try. We drove out in silence, navigating the narrow road by headlight, not speaking until we reached the highway 20 minutes later. Rachel called 911 from the first place with cell service, a gas station in Johnson City. She reported the dead man in the motorhome, the blood in the fifth wheel, our names and contact information. The police came to our house 3 days later. They'd found the body in the motorhome, just as I'd described. Cause of death was listed as self-inflicted trauma, likely due to acute psychosis. The fifth wheel's owners had been found too. Their truck had gone off the road 5 miles from the campground, killing them both instantly. The blood trail at their campsite was explained as injuries from a struggle to save their diabetic alert dog, which had died of unknown causes the night before. As for the sulfur smell, the Park Service sent a geologist who confirmed minor geothermal venting due to underground cave systems. Nothing dangerous, nothing unusual for the area. The park had been reopened after a brief closure for investigation. Everything had a rational explanation, but I know what we saw. I know about the hands, the tall figures, the ground that breathed and steamed and fed on the living. I know that Devil's Backbone Wilderness Area got its name for a reason, and that some places are hungry in ways that science can't explain. Rachel and I broke up 2 months later. We never talked about what happened. Not really, but it sat between us like a wall. She couldn't look at me without seeing that burning cedar tree. I couldn't look at her without remembering the sound of those hands scraping against bark. I don't camp anymore. I don't even like to go outside after dark. And sometimes when I'm in my apartment in Austin, I'll wake in the middle of the night with my heart pounding, convinced I can smell sulfur, convinced I can hear footsteps in the hallway. Too many footsteps, moving in perfect unison. I'll get up and check the locks, even though I know locks don't stop what came from that ground. I'll turn on every light and sit at my kitchen table until sunrise, watching the door, waiting for it to open. Because I know the truth now. I know there are places where the earth is hungry, where something old and patient waits beneath the surface. And I know that fire might drive it back temporarily, but it never really goes away. It's always there, just below, breathing sulfur through the cracks, waiting to feed. Story 5. My name is Jason. I'm 34. I saw my face carved into a tree at Cloudcroft, New Mexico, and that should have been the moment I turned the RV around and drove straight back to Dallas without stopping. But I didn't. Pride, stubbornness, the desperate need to prove to myself that I could handle a week alone in the Lincoln National Forest. Whatever the reason, I stayed. That decision cost me more than I knew a person could lose while still drawing breath. The drive up from Texas had taken 9 hours, my elderly Winnebago groaning and shuddering over every incline once I hit the mountains. Cloudcroft sits at nearly 9,000 feet, a tiny village swallowed by ponderosa pines and Douglas firs, where the air turns sharp enough to sting your lungs in early October. I'd chosen the spot deliberately. Remote, beautiful, and far enough from anything resembling my normal life that I might finally sleep through the night without waking up drenched in sweat, my ex-wife's voice still echoing in my ears about what a failure I'd become. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago. The drinking had gotten bad after that. Not falling down drunk every night, but enough that my hands shook most mornings. Enough that I'd started calling in sick to my job at the insurance firm. Enough that my younger sister Melissa had staged what she called an intervention, but what felt more like an ambush. She'd cried. I'd promised to get help. I'd lied. This trip was supposed to be different. A reset. Just me, the forest, and enough time to figure out who the hell Jason Whitmore was supposed to be, now that he wasn't anybody's husband, wasn't good at his job, wasn't much of anything except a man sliding toward 40 with nothing to show for it but a beat-up RV and a collection of regrets that grew heavier every year. I pulled into the dispersed camping area just off Forest Road 24 around 4 in the afternoon, the October sun already starting its descent behind the peaks. The spot was perfect, a small clearing ringed by towering pines, far enough from the main campground that I wouldn't hear families or generators, close enough to the road that I wouldn't feel completely cut off. A fire ring made of blackened stones sat in the center, and someone had left a neat stack of firewood under a tarp near the tree line. The first thing I did after parking was walk the perimeter, stretching my legs and taking in the view. The air smelled incredible. That particular scent of high-altitude pine and cold stone that makes your chest expand involuntarily. Everything was so quiet. Not silent, but quiet in a way that felt deliberate, like the forest was holding its breath. Birds called occasionally. Wind moved through the canopy with a sound like distant water. But underneath it all was a stillness that pressed against my eardrums. That's when I saw the tree. It stood at the western edge of the clearing, an ancient ponderosa with bark the color of dried blood in the slanting light, and carved into its trunk, maybe 6 feet up, was a face. My face. I stood there staring at it for a long time, my hands going numb in my pockets. The carving was crude but unmistakable, the same slightly crooked nose I'd broken playing high school football, the heavy brow, the downturned mouth I'd developed over years of disappointment. Even the way my hair fell, that stupid cowlick on the right side that never laid flat. Someone had taken considerable time and effort to carve this, the lines deep enough that sap had bled from them and dried in amber tears down the bark. My first rational thought was that it had to be a coincidence. Faces in tree bark, it's practically a cliché, right? Pareidolia, pattern recognition. The human brain desperate to find familiar shapes in random information. Except this wasn't random. This wasn't a vague impression or a trick of shadow. This was deliberate. Detailed. Recent, too. The exposed wood was still pale, not yet weathered gray. I walked closer, reached up to touch it. The carved wood was rough under my fingertips, still slightly sticky with sap. I traced the line of the nose, the curve of the mouth. Cold sweat broke out across my back despite the chill in the air. "Okay," I said out loud, my voice sounding strange and flat in the clearing. "Okay, this is weird, but there's got to be an explanation. Maybe someone from town had seen me drive through. Maybe this was some kind of local tradition, carving visitors' faces as a weird welcome. Maybe I was having some kind of breakdown and hallucinating the whole thing." That last option felt uncomfortably plausible. I backed away from the tree, pulling my phone from my pocket. No service, of course. I'd known there wouldn't be. That was part of the point of coming here. Complete disconnection. Now it felt less like a feature and more like a trap. The sun was sinking faster now, painting the undersides of clouds rust orange and purple. I needed to get the RV set up before dark, get a fire going, eat something, deal with the tree later. Or better yet, don't deal with it at all. It was just a tree, just a weird carving, probably meant for someone else who happened to look like me. I tried to believe that as I leveled the RV, connected the propane, and laid out my sleeping bag on the narrow bunk. I tried to believe it as I built a fire in the ring, using some of the mysteriously provided firewood. I tried to believe it as I heated a can of chili on my camp stove and ate it directly from the pot, too unsettled to bother with a bowl. But I couldn't stop looking at the tree. As twilight deepened into full darkness, the carving seemed to catch and hold the firelight in a way that made it look almost alive. The shadows in the carved lines shifted and moved, making the wooden face appear to change expressions. Sometimes it looked sad, sometimes angry, sometimes it looked like it was screaming. I drank some whiskey from the bottle I'd promised Melissa I wouldn't bring. Not much, just enough to take the edge off. Just enough to let me breathe a little easier. The alcohol spread warmth through my chest and fuzzed the sharp edges of my anxiety. I told myself I'd have one more drink and then go to bed. Try to get a good night's sleep. Things always looked better in the morning. That's what I was telling myself when I heard the knocking. 3 sharp raps, wood on wood, coming from somewhere in the darkness beyond the fire's light. I jerked upright in my camp chair, the whiskey bottle clutched in my hand. "Hello," I called out. My voice cracked embarrassingly. No answer, just the wind in the pines and the pop of the fire. I waited, heart hammering, but the knocking didn't repeat. Probably just a branch falling, or an animal. Lots of animals in these mountains. Elk, black bears, mountain lions. The thought of a mountain lion didn't exactly comfort me, but it was better than the alternatives my mind was starting to generate. I threw more wood on the fire, building it up until it roared and threw sparks high into the night. The bigger fire pushed back the darkness, creating a bubble of light around the clearing. I could see maybe 20 feet in every direction now, and nothing moved in that circle except wind-stirred branches and my own jittery shadow. The knocking came again. 3 raps, deliberate and evenly spaced. Definitely wood on wood. And this time I could place the direction. It was coming from the tree with the carving. I stood up fast enough to knock over my chair. "Who's there?" I shouted, and this time my voice had some strength in it, some anger mixing with the fear. "This isn't funny." Silence answered me. Long, stretching silence that seemed to press down from the black sky above. I grabbed my flashlight from the RV and walked toward the tree, the beam cutting through the darkness in a pale circle. My legs felt disconnected from my body, moving on their own while my brain screamed at me to get back in the RV, lock the door, and drive away. The carved face stared down at me, caught in the flashlight's beam. In this light, with the fire behind me throwing competing shadows, it looked even more like me, like I was staring at myself frozen in wood, trapped and screaming silently for help. I swept the flashlight around the base of the tree. Nothing. No footprints, no broken branches, no sign anyone had been here. I walked in a slow circle around the trunk, checking every angle. The bark was undisturbed except for the carving. No one hiding behind it. No explanation for the knocking. "You're losing it," I muttered to myself. "Stress and isolation and too much time in your own head. Go to bed, Jason. Sleep it off." I walked back to the fire, kicked dirt over the flames until they died to sullen red coals, and climbed into the RV. I locked both doors. Not that the flimsy locks would stop anything determined to get in, but the act of locking them made me feel slightly more secure. I lay down on the bunk, still fully dressed, and pulled the sleeping bag up to my chin. Sleep came in fits and starts, broken by strange dreams. I dreamed I was standing in the clearing, looking up at the carved tree, and as I watched, the wooden face opened its mouth and spoke my name. I dreamed I was running through the forest at night, branches tearing at my clothes and face, something breathing heavily right behind me but never quite catching up. I dreamed I was carving the tree myself, working by firelight with a knife I didn't recognize, and when I stepped back to look at my work I saw not my own face but my father's, who'd died of a heart attack when I was 23, and whom I'd spent the last 11 years trying and failing to live up to. I woke fully around 3 in the morning, gasping and drenched in sweat despite the cold. The RV was dark except for a thin line of moonlight coming through the gap in the curtains. I lay there listening to my heart hammer, trying to convince myself to relax, to go back to sleep. That's when I heard movement outside. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, circling the RV. Not the rustle of an animal, but the unmistakable sound of someone walking on 2 legs, pacing around my vehicle in the darkness. The steps were heavy, purposeful. They completed one full circuit, then another. I lay frozen, not breathing, listening to something walk around and around my RV like it was measuring its perimeter. I should have called out, should have yelled at them to go away, threatened to call the police, something, but I couldn't make my throat work. Terror had its hand wrapped around my windpipe and was squeezing. The footsteps stopped at the door. I heard breathing on the other side of the thin metal barrier. Deep, ragged breaths that sounded wrong somehow. Too wet, too slow. A hand touched the door handle and jiggled it. Once, twice, testing the lock. Then silence. I waited in the darkness, my body rigid for what felt like hours. Eventually, gray dawn light began to seep through the curtains. I hadn't slept again. I'd just lain there, staring at the door, waiting for it to open. When the sun was fully up, I finally worked up the courage to peer outside. The clearing looked exactly as I'd left it. Empty, peaceful, innocent. The fire ring held nothing but cold ash. The stack of firewood sat undisturbed. The tree with the carved face stood silent and still. I opened the door and stepped out into the morning cold. Frost had formed overnight, coating everything in a thin white glitter. I walked slowly around the RV, examining the ground. Footprints, everywhere. Bare footprints, human-shaped but somehow wrong. The toes were too long, the heel too narrow, and they circled the RV exactly as I'd heard them do in the night, round and round in an endless spiral before trailing off into the woods toward the north. I should have left then. Should have fired up the Winnebago and driven straight back to Texas without looking back. But something in me rebelled against the fear. I'd come here to prove I could handle being alone, to prove I wasn't falling apart. Running away would be admitting defeat, would be proving my ex-wife right about me being weak, would be proving I couldn't face anything harder than a bottle and a television screen. So I stayed. I made coffee on the camp stove, my hands shaking so badly I spilled grounds all over the counter. I forced myself to eat a granola bar even though it tasted like sawdust in my mouth. I told myself that in daylight, with the sun shining and birds singing in the trees, everything would look different, more manageable. I decided to hike. Movement would help. Getting away from the clearing would help. I pulled on my boots, grabbed my pack with water and emergency supplies, and headed north on one of the trails marked on my Forest Service map. The trail climbed steadily through dense pine forest, the path covered in a thick mat of fallen needles that muffled my footsteps. It felt good to move, to feel my muscles working, to fill my lungs with the sharp mountain air. For the first hour, I actually relaxed. The woods were beautiful in the autumn light, all golden beams slanting through the canopy and the smell of sun-warmed pine sap. I passed a few other landmarks, a rocky outcropping, a fallen log covered in bright orange fungus, a small stream that burbled over mossy stones. The normality of it all helped push back the terror of the night before. Then I saw the second carving. This tree stood in a small clearing where the trail split into two paths. Like the first, it was an old ponderosa, thick-trunked and towering, and carved into its bark about 7 feet up was another face. My face again. But this time it looked different. Older. The lines around the eyes were deeper. The mouth was opened in a silent scream. And something was wrong with the eyes. They'd been carved hollow, so they were just empty sockets staring out at nothing. My chest tightened. I looked around wildly, half expecting to see someone standing in the trees, watching me. But I was alone. Completely alone. I pulled out my map with shaking hands, trying to get my bearings. I'd hiked maybe 2 miles from camp. This tree couldn't have been carved since I'd arrived. It would have taken hours of work. So someone had done this before I got here. But how had they known what I looked like? How had they known I was coming? Unless I wasn't the first. Unless whoever was doing this carved faces of everyone who came to these woods. Maybe I just happened to look like some previous visitor, and the resemblance was coincidental. I tried to make that explanation work in my head, but it felt hollow, like I was lying to myself just to keep functioning. I stood there for a long time, staring up at the eyeless wooden face. Finally, I pulled out my phone and took a picture, even though I knew I had no service to send it to anyone. Just having the evidence felt important somehow. Proof that I wasn't hallucinating, that this was real. The temperature seemed to drop as I stood there. The sun had gone behind clouds, and the golden light drained from the forest, leaving everything gray and flat. I shivered and zipped my jacket higher. That's when I noticed the smell. Faint at first, but growing stronger. Something rotten. Something dead. It seemed to be coming from further up the right-hand trail. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, go back to camp, pack up and leave. But curiosity is a powerful thing, and fear makes you stupid. I wanted to know what was causing the smell. Needed to know. So I followed the right-hand path, breathing through my mouth as the stench grew worse. I found the source about a 1/4 mile up the trail. Deer. At least 6 of them, laid out in a perfect circle in a small clearing. Their bodies were fresh, maybe a day old, but arranged with impossible precision. Each deer's head pointed toward the center of the circle, their legs straight, their bodies evenly spaced. In the middle of the circle was a stone cairn, about 3 feet high, made of carefully stacked rocks. No scavengers had touched the bodies. No insects swarmed them. They just lay there in their geometrically perfect arrangement, rotting in silence. I backed away slowly, my gorge rising. This wasn't natural, wasn't normal. Whatever was happening in these woods, it was deliberate and structured and deeply, deeply wrong. I ran back to camp. Not jogged, ran. Full-out desperate sprinting, branches slapping my face and arms, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't stop until I burst back into my clearing and stood there, hands on knees, gasping and shaking. The carved face watched me from its tree. In the flat afternoon light, the wooden features seemed sad, almost pitying. I was throwing my gear into the RV when I realized my keys were missing. I checked my pockets. Not there. I checked the cup holder where I usually kept them. Empty. I tore apart the RV, checking every surface, every drawer, every corner where they might have fallen. Nothing. The keys were gone. I stood in the middle of the RV, breathing hard, trying not to scream. The keys couldn't have just vanished. I'd used them to drive here. I'd had them in my pocket last night, unless they'd fallen out when I was walking around the tree, or when I was sleeping, or when I was running on the trail. I spent the next hour searching the clearing in a grid pattern, checking every inch of ground, kicking through pine needles and examining the area around the fire ring. No keys. I retraced my route to the carved tree, scanning the ground as I went. Nothing. As the sun started to sink toward the horizon again, I had to face the truth. I was stuck here, stuck in this clearing with its watching wooden face and its circling footprints and its suffocating silence. I built another fire as darkness fell, making it huge and bright, burning through the provided firewood at a reckless pace. I didn't care. I needed the light, needed the warmth, needed something to push back against the darkness that was closing in from all sides. I sat in my camp chair, the firelight painting dancing shadows across the clearing, and watched the carved tree. The face stared back at me, expression shifting in the flickering light. I could have sworn it was looking directly at me, could have sworn I saw the wooden mouth move, just slightly, like it was trying to form words. The knocking started at midnight. 3 raps, wood on wood, coming from the tree. Then silence. Then 3 more raps. Over and over, steady as a heartbeat, marking time in the darkness. I huddled in my chair, the fire throwing its circle of light around me, and listened to the knocking continue. Counted the intervals. 3 knocks, 20 seconds of silence. 3 knocks, 20 seconds. On and on. After an hour, I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, grabbed a burning branch from the fire like a torch, and walked toward the tree. The knocking stopped as I approached. "What do you want?" I shouted at the carved face. "Why are you doing this?" The wind picked up, rushing through the pines with a sound like a distant scream. The carved face stared down at me with my own features twisted in wooden agony. And then it spoke. Not out loud, not with sound, but I heard it in my head as clearly as if someone had whispered directly into my ear. A voice that sounded like mine, but wrong. Flattened and distorted like it was being played backward. "You came to find yourself," it said. "Here I am." I staggered backward, dropping the burning branch. It landed in the pine needles and started a small fire that I frantically stamped out. When I looked back up at the tree, the carved mouth had changed. It was open now, wider, screaming. I ran back to the RV and locked myself inside, my heart trying to punch its way through my rib cage. I curled up on the bunk and pulled the sleeping bag over my head like a child hiding from monsters. But I wasn't a child. I was a 34-year-old man who'd come to the woods to prove he wasn't falling apart, and instead I was discovering exactly how fragile the membrane between sanity and madness really was. I must have slept eventually because I woke to gray dawn light again. My body ached from tension, and my mouth tasted like rust and fear. I lay there for a long moment, listening. No footsteps, no knocking, just silence. When I finally got up and looked outside, I saw that the tree had changed again. The carved face was gone. In its place, carved into the trunk, were words. Block letters gouged deep into the wood. "Tomorrow you join us." I stopped breathing, stared at the words until they swam in my vision. Tomorrow. Join us. Who was us? Join them in what? In the wood, in the ground, in whatever hell this clearing had become. I spent the day searching desperately for my keys, expanding my search radius farther into the woods. I found nothing but more carvings, more faces in more trees. Some looked like me. Others were different, men and women, young and old, their features twisted in various expressions of terror and pain. All recent, all carved with the same methodical precision. How many people had come to this clearing? How many had seen their faces in the wood? How many had been told they would join us tomorrow? As the sun set on my second night, I made a decision. I wasn't waiting for tomorrow. I would walk out. The main road was only about 3 miles away. I'd hike through the night if I had to. Get to the road, flag down a car, get the hell away from this place. I packed a small backpack with water, my flashlight, and what little food I had left. I left everything else. The RV could rot here for all I cared. I'd come to these woods looking for myself, and I'd found something I wished I could unfind. Now, I just wanted out. I set out east, toward where I remembered the main road being. The forest was already dark, the sun having dropped behind the peaks, but my flashlight cut a decent path through the gloom. I walked fast, not quite running, but close, my breath fogging in the cold air. After about an hour, I should have reached the road. Instead, I found myself back in the clearing. Impossible. I'd gone in a straight line east. I'd checked my compass constantly. But here I was, standing in the same clearing I'd left, the same fire ring, the same tree with its message carved into the bark. Tomorrow, you join us. I tried again, north this time, walked for 2 hours following my compass religiously, marking trees as I passed so I'd know if I was going in circles. When I finally emerged into an opening, it was the clearing again, the exact same clearing. I tried west, south, northeast, every direction. Every time, after walking for what should have taken me miles away, I ended up back where I started. The forest was a maze that only had one room, and I was trapped in it. By the time true night fell, I was exhausted and terrified beyond rational thought. I collapsed by the fire ring, and that's when I noticed the new addition to the clearing. More firewood had appeared under the tarp. Fresh wood, neatly stacked, exactly like when I'd arrived, and next to it was a pile of stones. Not random stones. Cut stones, smooth and flat, perfect for stacking. I understood then. The deer in the circle. The cairn at their center. The stones waiting for me here. Tomorrow, when whatever haunted these woods decided it was time, I would join the others. My body would be arranged with theirs. A stone cairn would mark the spot, and my face would be carved into another tree for the next person who came looking for peace in these mountains. I picked up one of the stones. It was heavy and cold and felt obscenely final in my hand. I thought about smashing it into my own skull, denying this place its victory, but I couldn't make myself do it. Survival instinct ran too deep. Instead, I built up the fire again and sat beside it, watching the tree that had spoken to me. The message was still there, but as the fire grew and its light played across the bark, I could see something else. The wood was changing, bulging outward. The letters were being pushed out from inside like something was trying to emerge from within the tree itself. I watched for hours as the transformation continued. The bark split and peeled. Something pale pressed outward, and finally around midnight it tore free. An arm. Thin and white and covered in patterns that looked like wood grain. It reached out from the tree trunk, fingers uncurling, grasping at the air. As I sat frozen in horror, more arms emerged. Then heads. Then torsos. People. Or things that had once been people, pulling themselves free from the wood. Each one wore a face I'd seen carved into the trees. Each one moved with the jerky, uncertain motion of something that had forgotten how bodies worked. They formed a circle around my fire, staring at me with hollow wooden eyes. There were at least 20 of them, maybe more in the darkness beyond the firelight. They didn't speak, didn't attack, just stood there, waiting. The tree I'd first seen, the one that had borne my face, split down the middle with a sound like a scream. From the opening, another figure emerged. This one looked exactly like me. Same height, same build, same face, but its eyes were holes, and when it opened its mouth, nothing but darkness poured out. It walked toward me with slow, deliberate steps. The circle of wooden people parted to let it through. It stopped at the edge of the firelight and extended one hand toward me. "Tomorrow is here," it said in my voice. "Time to join us." I ran. Again. Stupid and futile and desperate. I crashed through the circle of wooden people, their cold hands clutching at me as I passed, and sprinted into the darkness. I had no flashlight, no sense of direction, no hope of escape. I just ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. When I finally collapsed, I was back in the clearing. Of course I was. There was nowhere else to go. The wooden people were waiting for me. They grabbed me with their cold, hard hands and lifted me up. I screamed and fought, but they were impossibly strong. They carried me to the center of the clearing and laid me down in the dirt. The thing wearing my face knelt beside me. It placed one wooden hand on my chest, directly over my heart. "You came here to find yourself," it said, "to discover who you really are. We're showing you. You're hollow. You're rotting inside. You're already dead. You've just been too stubborn to lie down." And the terrible thing was, I felt the truth in those words. I had been dead. Dead in every way that mattered. The divorce, the drinking, the slow erosion of everything I'd once been. I'd come to these woods not to find myself, but to confirm what I already knew, that there was nothing left to find. The wooden hand pressed down harder. I felt something crack in my chest. Not my ribs. Something deeper. Something in the core of me that I didn't know could break. "Let go," the thing whispered. "Stop fighting. Join us. It's so much easier than pretending to be alive." And I almost did. Almost let myself sink into that darkness. Almost gave up. But then I thought about Melissa crying at her kitchen table, begging me to get help. I thought about my dad, who'd worked himself to death trying to provide for us, who'd never given up even when everything was falling apart. I thought about my ex-wife, who'd left not because she hated me, but because she couldn't watch me destroy myself anymore. I thought about all the ways I'd failed to be alive, and something in me rebelled. Not dramatically, not with sudden strength or willpower, just a quiet, stubborn refusal to let this place have me. "No," I whispered. The wooden hand lifted slightly. The thing wearing my face tilted its head, confused. "No," I said again, louder. "I'm not joining you. I'm not done yet." The circle of wooden people swayed. Their hollow eyes flickered with something that might have been surprise. The thing with my face leaned closer. "You can't leave," it said. "The forest won't let you go. We've tried to show you that." "I don't care," I said. "I'll walk until morning. I'll walk in circles forever if I have to, but I'm not lying down. I'm not giving up." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the wooden people began to crack. Fissures appeared in their pale surfaces, spreading like lightning across their bodies. They looked at each other, then at me, and one by one they crumbled. They fell apart into splinters and dust, collapsing back into the earth from which they'd come. The thing with my face was the last to go. It stared at me with its hollow eyes, and I could have sworn I saw something like respect in that empty gaze. "Maybe you're not as dead as I thought," it said. Then it too crumbled into nothing. The clearing fell silent. The fire had burned down to coals. I lay there in the dirt, breathing hard, every muscle trembling with exhaustion. Eventually, I managed to sit up. The carved trees were still there. The message was still there. But something had changed. The oppressive weight that had pressed down on the clearing was gone. The air felt lighter. The stars overhead looked like stars again instead of distant, indifferent eyes. I stood on shaking legs and walked to the tree where I'd first seen my face. The carving was different now. Still my features, but peaceful, calm. The mouth was closed, The eyes were just shallow indentations instead of hollow pits, and lying at the base of the tree were my keys. I picked them up with trembling hands, not quite believing they were real. But they were solid and familiar, with the worn rubber grip and the small flashlight fob my sister had given me for Christmas. I clutched them to my chest and started laughing. Not joyful laughter, the kind of unhinged, exhausted laughter that comes when you've been pushed past your breaking point and somehow survived. I broke camp as the first gray light of dawn touched the eastern sky. I threw everything into the RV with no organization, no care for order. I just wanted to get in and drive and not stop until I was far, far away from Cloudcroft and the Lincoln National Forest and whatever had happened in these woods. The Winnebago started on the first try. I'd never heard a more beautiful sound than that engine turning over. I put it in gear and drove down the forest road, not looking back at the clearing, keeping my eyes fixed forward. The drive back to the main highway took 15 minutes. Just 15 minutes after all those hours of walking in circles. The forest let me go. I didn't stop in Cloudcroft. Didn't stop for gas or food or anything. I drove straight through to Roswell, put 3 hours between me and those woods before I finally pulled into a truck stop and broke down crying in the parking lot. That was 6 weeks ago. I'm back in Dallas now. I've been going to AA meetings 3 times a week. I'm seeing a therapist, a good one who doesn't press too hard when I tell her I need time before I talk about what happened in New Mexico. I'm working on rebuilding things with Melissa. I'm trying. The nightmares come most nights. I dream I'm back in that clearing, watching the wooden people emerge from the trees. I dream about the thing with my face telling me I'm already dead. I dream about lying down in the dirt and giving up. But I wake up. Every morning, I wake up, and I get out of bed. And I try to be a little more alive than I was the day before. I sold the RV, couldn't stand to look at it anymore. With the money, I paid for more therapy and put the rest in a savings account. Maybe, someday, I'll use it to take a real vacation. Somewhere warm. Somewhere with beaches and crowds and absolutely no trees. The physical scars are minimal. Some scratches on my arms from running through the forest. A bruise on my chest where the wooden hand pressed down. But the other scars, the ones no one can see, those are going to take a lot longer to heal. I still don't fully understand what happened in those woods. Was it real? Some kind of supernatural entity that fed on despair and fear? Or was it a manifestation of my own broken psyche? A hallucination born from alcohol withdrawal and untreated depression and the desperate need to hit rock bottom before I could start climbing back up? In the end, it doesn't matter. What matters is that when that thing told me to give up, to stop fighting, to accept that I was already dead, I said no. I chose to keep going. That's what I hold on to during the hard nights, that moment of refusal, that stubborn, stupid, human insistence on survival even when everything seems lost. Maybe I saw something in those woods that shouldn't exist. Maybe I saw nothing but my own darkness reflected back at me. Either way, I'm still here, still breathing, still trying, still scared out of my mind but still pushing forward. Last week I drove past a park with some old trees. For just a second, I thought I saw a face in the bark of an oak. My heart stopped. My hands went numb. But when I looked again, it was just random patterns in the wood, just shadows and texture and my own traumatized brain trying to find monsters where none existed. I kept driving, kept breathing, kept being alive, because in the end, that's all any of us can do. Keep moving forward through the darkness, keep refusing to lie down, keep insisting that tomorrow might be better even when today feels like it's killing us. My name is Jason. I'm 34 years old. I saw my face carved into a tree at Cloudcroft, New Mexico, and it tried to convince me I was already dead. But I'm not dead. Not yet. Not for a long time, if I have anything to say about it. The trees can keep their carvings. I'm taking back my life.